Hermione spoke each syllable of the long, twisting incantation with careful precision. As she finished the last words, faint silver-white lines began to spread outward from the space between her brows, tracing delicate filaments across her pale skin. Ryan watched her with a small, approving smile. Then, in a clear, resonant voice, he added, "Now, imagine that you're waking from a deep trance. Feel the warmth of the morning sun brushing your cheek. You've just returned to your own senses." His words carried an undeniable magic of their own, gently coaxing Hermione's body into a half-dreamlike state. She felt drowsy, as if on the brink of sleep, but the spell continued uninterrupted. At that moment, a cluster of silvery white flames, Goobler's famed fairy fire, drifted from Ryan's outstretched palm like dandelion seeds caught on a breeze. They floated over and came to rest on Hermione's brow, where they coalesced into a single, translucent flame-shaped sigil. The glowing lines on her skin vanished, absorbed by the new mark. Ryan tapped the table once. "All right," he said. Hermione's eyelids fluttered open. She blinked, fully awake. Hermione felt as though she'd been submerged in a natural hot spring. A soothing warmth enveloped her, chasing away the lingering hunger she'd carried since lunch. She was pleasantly full. "How long has it been?" she murmured, blinking as she took in her surroundings. By her reckoning, it ought to be nearly 2 o'clock, the official start time for the event. Yet nothing had changed. Dumbledore's place at the staff table remained conspicuously vacant, as did the chairs reserved for the heads of the other schools and for Arthur Weasley from the Ministry of Magic. "You can probably guess," Ryan replied with a casual shrug. "Including the 3 minutes you spent chanting the incantation, it's been exactly 4 minutes and 15 seconds. 4 minutes? Hermione breathed, astonished. "That fast?" With a deft flick of his wrist, Ryan tapped the air beside them. Instantly, a silver mirror shimmered into view, floating in midair. Hermione instinctively brought her fingers to her forehead. There, just above her brow, was the faint scorch of a flame-shaped mark. Ryan's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Ah," he said softly, "so you've noticed it." Ryan watched Hermione with a cool intensity. "The celestial fire of Kublai still burns between your brows. This magic isn't as simple as you think. Until that flame is completely extinguished, you can't truly learn the spell. Right now, you're only channeling its ambient power. You haven't mastered the incantation itself." Hermione frowned at her reflection in the ornate silver mirror, fingers brushing over the faint burn mark on her forehead. "That's hardly cheering news. So when do I officially learn it? And must I really recite the full incantation every time?" 3 minutes of chanting each session. I might as well skip dinner." With a graceful flick of his wand, Ryan dissolved the mirror into a swirl of silvery smoke that drifted into the air. He slipped the wand home and fixed Hermione with unblinking moonlit eyes, the golden sigils in his irises flickering like embers. "You want to speed this up? Very well. For the next 10 days, abandon all rich foods. No meat, no dairy, no sugar. When you do, that mark between your brows will fade. Only then can you move on." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "As for the incantation, I never truly required you to chant it each time. I insisted on it only so you'd take this seriously and not make careless errors. From now on, focus your mind on that spot above your eyes. Picture a spark glowing there and let it grow." Hermione exhaled and closed her eyes. "No chanting, just visualizing the flame? That's more manageable." Ryan inclined his head. "Exactly. Practice 3 times a day. And remember, no second helpings at dinner." She opened her eyes, determination flickering across her features. "Understood. I'll begin right away." Ryan nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Keep your focus, and we'll see just how quickly you can truly master the celestial fire." "All right," Hermione muttered, steeling herself. "I'll activate the hunger suppression spell." 10 days, 3 times a day," Professor Bracken reminded her. "That's 30 activations in all. 30 times." Hermione inhaled deeply, closed her eyes, and tightened every muscle. The ember-red sigil above her brow flared to life, then winked out, flared again, and died once more, as if powered by a faulty bulb. The simple burnt-orange glyph shimmered and reshaped itself into a miniature inferno, only to collapse back into its original form. Hermione opened her eyes in frustration. "It's not working," she complained. "I did exactly as you said, focused, calmed my mind, but each time I try, I lose my concentration." Professor Bracken nodded, as though he'd anticipated the question. The secret lies in the nature of Goobelei fairy fire, he explained. It's not just any enchantment, it's living fire, an unstable, ever-hungry plasma. Because it's perpetually starving, it constantly drains ambient magical energy. Your own hunger is your deficiency. Until the nutrients you've ingested pass completely into your bloodstream, your body remains full. Any magical nourishment you add simply overflows and goes to waste. That's why you can't sustain the spell. Hermione frowned, running a hand through her hair. But isn't magic supposed to bypass normal digestion? If I've digested half the day's meals, why can't I tap into that residual energy extra times? Why am I stuck with the same 3 meals a day? Professor Bracken offered a patient smile. Magic can't override your body's physiological limits. That fullness is real. Until your stomach and bloodstream clear, there's no deficiency for the spell to fill. We'll have to find another approach to extend your energy reserves. Hermione exhaled, determination flashing in her eyes. 30 attempts down, or 30 failures. Yet she refused to accept defeat. If she couldn't force her body to go longer without food this way, she would discover a new path forward. After all, the mark of mastery lay not in flawless execution, but in the art of overcoming every obstacle magic or nature could present. Hermione frowned thoughtfully. So there are people who just graze all day? Small meals every few hours? Ryan shook his head. This isn't really about eating to satisfy hunger. The substance I'm talking about doesn't fill you in the usual sense. It alters your body's perception of hunger, keeping you feeling nourished, healthy, and fully functional, as though you've eaten, until it wears off. You simply won't notice your appetite while it's active. Once your body has completely processed it, then you'll feel hunger as normal. Hermione's brow lifted. Let me try this. If I take it before bed, by the time I wake up it'll be digested. Would I wake up hungry? Generally, no. Ryan leaned back. Although you burn energy during sleep, most of your muscles are at rest, especially in your limbs. Only low-level processes, your heartbeat, breathing, digestion, are active. You'll consume far less energy than you do during the day. Aha! I see. Hermione's eyes lit up. What is it? Ryan asked. If I do intense exercise, I'll burn through the substance faster and get hungry sooner. Ryan smiled, amused. Exactly. You could speed up or slow down the process with your activity level. He paused, then added with a wink. And in a way, thirst is like hunger. If you're not drinking enough water, your body will complain much like it complains when it needs food. Hermione shifted uncomfortably in her seat, suddenly feeling that Ryan across from her had morphed into a predator, eat up all sharp teeth and hungry eyes. What did you say? She asked, voice tight. Ryan leaned forward. I said, although you're still so young, I can. Can what? Hermione cut him off, lowering her head. Her words fell into a hush, and in that instant, the buzz of the great hall froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Floating candles paused in midair. Only Hermione and Raya remained, their breathing the sole sound. A pale gray mist swirled around them, wrapping them in its chill. Time stretched on for an hour, though they felt neither breath nor heartbeat change. Then, as suddenly as it had halted, time resumed. The enchanted ceiling twinkled. Students leaned back into laughter and gossip, but Hermione kept her head bowed, the silvery white glow still flickering between her eyebrows. She stared so intently at the polished oak table, it seemed she expected its grain to reveal the deepest secrets of magic. Ryan nudged her gently, offering light-hearted quips in hopes of drawing her out, but Hermione remained silent, eyes unblinking. Just when he was about to give up, a sudden roar of excitement, like a landslide of cheers, erupted from one corner of the hall. Hermione's gaze flickered upward, and she and Ryan exchanged a look of shared wonder, the long, silent hour finally behind them. A spiraling staircase of clouds materialized before the tall oak door, twisting upward and vanishing into the sky. Chapter 698, The Chewing Fire Dragon. The moment the enchanted spiral staircase materialized, every professor at the head table rose to their feet. The deans of the 4 great magical schools, Hogwarts, Botan, Durmstrang, and their counterpart, stepped forward, each guiding their students to the long table reserved for their academy. In perfect order, they led their contingents from the castle's grand hall into the broad courtyard before the foyer, gathering beneath the newly unveiled stairway. Representing Durmstrang and Bosbotens were two of their most distinguished upperclassmen, Castrosbucher and Castor Polak, whose very presence lent gravitas to the occasion. Alongside them, the trio of Ryans slipped into place among Hermione Granger, Luna Lovegood, Katie Bell, and Penelope Clearwater, taking up positions at the front, middle, and rear of the Ravenclaw line. Thanks to a deliberate dampening of his magical signature, Ryan remained largely unnoticed by the other students, yet from his quiet vantage point, he enjoyed the clearest view of the spectacle. The staircase itself was a masterful blend of fairy tale imagery and modern design. Its sweeping helix called to mind Jack's legendary beanstalk, but instead of tendrils, there rose a gleaming spiral of metal and stone that might have been lifted straight from a subway station. Enchanted runes glimmered along the banisters, hinting at the powerful magic that would propel any traveler skyward in an endless ascent. As professors and pupils alike gazed upward, anticipation thrummed through the courtyard. No one could say exactly where or to what they were being led. All that was certain was that the next step, quite literally, would change everything. The steps and handrails drift upward at a glacial pace, their cloud-like material making them almost disappear into the air. From the murmurs around them, it was clear most students mistakenly believed they'd have to climb the staircase under their own power. Those who weren't athletic were already struggling, and the ones afraid of heights were even more anxious, worried they'd tire halfway up, their legs give out, and they'd tumble. Hermione looked every bit as apprehensive. Paired with Ryan, she hadn't handled broomsticks as often as Harry, Ron, or their friends back in the original world. Beyond the occasional flying lesson, where she'd only hovered at low altitude, she'd had little experience at all. Now, confronted by this seemingly endless ladder, she pressed against Ryan with a limp, fearful look, completely forgetting her own capabilities. After all, most of the potions she'd been taking, brewed by Ryan himself, were specifically designed to bolster her endurance. Yet in that moment, her fear drowned out any confidence she might have felt. In raw strength, Hermione could never match Harry and Neville, both of whom had been magically enhanced, but neither of the boys possessed enough endurance to withstand what lay ahead. In sheer physical resilience, however, Hermione outclassed them both. She could have leapt from the nearly 700-foot Quidditch stands without so much as a bruise, magic or no. Yet terror had seized her so completely that her legs gave way, and her fleeting thrill of exhilaration evaporated almost at once. Then, from high among the clouds, a voice rang out, clear, distant, and as commanding as a god's whisper. "Attention, everyone! Before the warriors emerge, form 2 columns by house and school. When your leader has spoken, ascend the staircase." At once, Professor McGonagall rose from the Gryffindor contingent and moved to the base of the spiral stairway. Obediently, the Gryffindor students fell into 2 neat lines and advanced toward the twisting steps. "It's alive! It's moving!" Fred and George Weasley, standing at the front, were the first to notice the staircase's astonishing secret. The steps and the handrail were sliding upward on their own, as though propelled by unseen hands. The twin brothers shot past Percy, who stood at the head of the ladder with a teasing grin, and immediately took air places on the rungs, despite Professor McGonagall's sharp warning. The moment one of them set foot on a step, the entire structure lunged upward at breakneck speed. Even the students from Durmstrang, who were poised at the far edge of the Black Lake, saw the ladder move and gasped in surprise. "Watch out!" McGonagall shouted. "Hold on to the handrails." True to her word, Fred and George Weasley clutched the rails, Percy followed in their wake, and the rest of the Gryffindors scrambled aboard. Within seconds, the ladder had vanished into a bank of low clouds, carrying them out of sight. No sooner had the last Gryffindor disappeared than Professor McGonagall herself leapt onto the rising steps and with an imperious nod was gone too. Moments later, Professor Flitwick beckoned the other students forward. Unnoticed in the scramble, Ryan, standing beside Kate and Penello, stepped up first and planted his foot on a rung. He paused, struck by the strange new sensation. "The texture of these steps is completely different," he murmured, half to himself. "They're springy, yet solid, and my foot seems to sink in slightly, like stepping on a cushion of air." Across the courtyard, the Durmstrang students craned their necks, eyebrows raised as the enchanted ladder ascended into the swirling mist, ferrying Hogwarts' bravest and most impulsive up and away. Kate blinked, staring out at Ryan's right side as their carriage ascended into the clouds. Within a minute, they emerged into a breathtaking sight. The entire Quidditch stadium had been transformed. The playing field, the stands, even the railings and spectator chairs now looked as if they were carved from billowing white mist. Instead of stepping directly onto the grass, Ryan and his companions found themselves on a moving track, much like the conveyor belt at an airport security checkpoint. As their baggage slid past an X-ray scanner, rows of Gryffindor students already filled the seats ahead. Their conveyor belt came to a gentle halt at a small cluster of empty benches beside them. Beyond that, the central pitch was completely vacant, save for Arthur Weasley perched on his own little cloud. Above the field, 4 referee stands floated on identical wisps of vapor. Seated in them were Albus Dumbledore, Igor Karkaroff, Olim Maxim, and Nefinch Volkanova. Before them arched a vast 100 by 100-foot curved screen emblazoned with the crests of the competing colleges and schools. Right now, its display flickered to life with live images from deep within the Forbidden Forest, the rules of the game already in motion. To continue this thrilling chapter, please turn the page. In a wide clearing deep within the Forbidden Forest, a small assembly of dragons stood at rest. Hungarian tree eagles, Peruvian poisonous dragons, Hebridean black dragons, and Australian white eyes. Yet all eyes were fixed not on the beasts themselves, but on the elaborate riding gear fitted to the fire dragon at the center of the ring. A heavy iron bit lay in the creature's jaws, its long reins coiled neatly to one side. Around its massive belly was strapped a broad girth belt, the buckles at either end secured to a padded saddle cushion on the dragon's back. From each side of that cushion hung a curved metal stirrup. Clearly, everything had been prepared for a rider. Suddenly, the stands erupted in cheers. Clouds of dust whirled through the humid air as the crowd strained forward, eager to catch the first glimpse of the warriors who would challenge these mighty beasts. Even the Hufflepuff and Slytherin students, who'd only just descended the ladders in search of seats, found themselves swept up in the excitement, craning their necks to see who would mount the fire dragon first. The camera's angle drifted again, as if its unseen operator were reading the thoughts of the students in the stands. When the view settled, everyone saw a newly built wooden cabin at pitch level, clearly Hagrid's handiwork. Almost before anyone could register it, the cabin door swung open, and 5 figures emerged in procession. At the head of the line stood Arthur Weasley, his weathered face bright with pride. A ripple of excitement swept through the Gryffindor section. Percy leaped to his feet, and Fred and George hollered, "Dad's out there!" Behind Mr. Weasley came the 4 champions, led by Fleur Delacour. Each had discarded their school robes in favor of sleek protective gear, chest, shoulders, thighs, knees, and shins, all sheathed in a shell marked by elegant vertical ridges. Hoods framed their faces, and long cloaks billowed behind them. Their uniforms' colors matched their schools, Fleur in pale Beauxbatons blue, Victor Krum in deep Durmstrang red, Elva's in vibrant Ilvermorny green, and Harry in striking Hogwarts black, announcing to the world exactly who they represented today. Chapter 699. All living things' sunlight filtered through the trees, catching in her golden hair and turning it to silver. A few wayward strands danced in the breeze, brushing against the girl's luminous cheeks. She parted her softly glistening lips and bit them gently, as though savoring a quiet secret. Her sky-blue warrior's uniform clung to her form, accentuating every graceful curve. Around her, the other fighters and even the great fire dragon stood transfixed. No one quite noticed who'd trained the camera on her, but as the stadium's seats filled and the crowd's buzzing excitement rose to a crescendo, the hum of conversation dropped as soon as the lens settled on Fleur. It was as if the world had paused to admire a live Van Gogh canvas, every breath caught in every throat. On the big screen, Fleur's gaze shifted, her deep blue eyes sweeping over the arena's expanse. For a moment, it felt as though she had pierced beyond the glass, looking straight into each spectator's soul. A hush washed over the stands. Her presence was that powerful. Then she smiled. Brilliant white teeth lit up her face, as clear and refreshing as a mountain spring. In an instant, the stadium seemed to awaken, every heart stirring at the sight of her radiant joy. The anonymous cameraman followed suit, angling his lens just so, and the screen flickered to life with Mr. Weasley, wind-whipped and grinning wildly as if caught in a gale. The sharp contrast between his tousled hair and the pristine pageantry around him set the stands abuzz, not with praise for the fire dragons or the polished warrior uniforms, but with exclamations like, "Have my eyes gone rogue?" Even young Ginny, bundled in her little cotton jacket, couldn't help furrowing her brow at her father's disarray. Oblivious to the murmurs, Mr. Weasley practically bounced in excitement. He cleared his throat, raised the golden snitch he held aloft, and called out, "Hello, everyone. I'm sure you've already guessed the gist from this golden snitch. Today's contest takes place high in the sky. Each warrior will don the special uniforms you've been refining in your alchemy classes, mount a fire dragon, and race along a course built entirely of clouds. But beware, hidden within those clouds are magical traps, and our mysterious guest will be doing everything in their power to thwart our competitors. Get ready for a spectacle you won't soon forget. However, our warriors will also face the risk of tumbling from great heights," Arthur Weasley said, peering into the camera. "But rest assured, the uniforms you've enchanted will protect them. We've tested every seam and stitch." He paused, then swept the camera back to the 4 contestants, each already astride their fire dragon. Naturally, all eyes drifted to Fleur Delacour, riding the Australian oval eye, undoubtedly the most beautiful of the breed. Mr. Weasley seemed to expect this momentary distraction. His voice, a touch shaky, floated in again from off-screen. "Before the match begins, our champions will launch from the Quidditch pitch and descend into the center of the arena on their dragons. All right, take flight." A thunderous chorus of dragon roars split the air, whipping gusts across the ground. The camera wobbled for a heartbeat before refocusing on a streak of gold leading the charge, the Peruvian viper-tooth, famed for its blistering speed. On its back sat Irvas of Castrube. He pulled his hood snug, clipped his goggles into place, and let his cloak snap in the gale, striking a defiantly heroic figure against the swirling dust. The stands erupted in cheers as Victor Crumb strode onto the field alongside the Hebridean Black. For a moment, the giant screen split in two, on the left, Crumb squinting against the wind, on the right, the sleek black dragon. Then it divided again and again until all 4 champions and their dragons filled quadrants of the display. Crumb and his Hebridean Black, Fleur Delacour and her refined silvery blue gown, Cedric Diggory's confident smile, and Harry Potter gripping his broom beside a snarling Hungarian horn. Tail. Every house roared for its hero, and amid the Hogwarts, Durmstrang, and Hufflepuff chants, a smaller but fervent crowd went wild every time the camera lingered on Fleur's radiant smile. One of those fans, Zacharias, couldn't contain himself. He jumped right into a knot of Harry's supporters, pumping his fists and shouting, "Our goddess is the best! Harry Potter's no Hufflepuff champion." Angered, some of Harry's backers shoved Zacharias. He tumbled to the ground. Undeterred, he rolled onto one knee, pointed emphatically at Fleur as her hair fluttered in the breeze and bellowed toward the camera. "She's looking right at me! Shoot me!" "It's worth it." He sneered the words out with his mouth twisted, eyes squinting, saliva spattering across his chin. Utterly revolting. Ryan couldn't help but think of the heroine from that cult hit drama, Runaway Sweetheart. Even Dudley had given up on delivering a proper lesson. He'd fired a dialed-down, stunning spell that only managed to knock the fellow unconscious. Rubbing his eyes, Ryan glanced at Harry, still trailing behind the others, and realized that nearly no one was staring at the scoreboard. A deafening roar overhead explained why. It overpowered the monitor's steady whistle. Instinctively, everyone sprang to their feet. The Castrubsha supporters in particular leapt up, waving wildly at the sky. A colossal fire dragon was swooping down toward the stadium, its scaled body slicing through the clouds. The rushing wind whipped through the stands, rattling banners and scarves. In fact, Dean Gryffindor's scarlet and gold neckerchief caught the gale, drifted upward, and tangled itself in Professor McGonagall's tight bun. The stern professor merely blinked, presumed it was a stray breeze, and carried on as if nothing had happened. The gale that had swept through the stadium sprang from a single source, the Peruvian venomous dragon itself. After months grounded, it seemed determined to release every ounce of pent-up energy. In a blur too fast for the naked eye to track, it tore around the arena's perimeter, whipping up dust and deafening wind. At last, reluctantly, it settled in the center of the field, its great wings folding with a tired grace. Elva slid smoothly from the dragon's scaly back. No sooner had her boots touched the turf than the stands erupted in a roar like an avalanche crashing into a tidal wave. Spectators who'd only glimpsed the dragon's terrifying speed during the previous individual challenge now felt it in their bones. Back then, the beast had been so focused on Elvis that it never ventured close to the crowd. Tonight, however, there was no mistaking its ferocity, and no denying that the legends about the fastest fire drake in the world were absolutely true. Several upperclassmen who'd bragged they could face a venomous dragon now huddled in their seats, faces buried in their hands. Among them was Marcus Flint of Slytherin House. A seventh year, Flint should have been nearing the end of his final season as a Quidditch chaser if the tournament hadn't canceled all matches this year. Rain pattered steadily on the stadium roof, a mournful echo of his dashed hopes. Flint's mind drifted back to another rainy night a year ago, when he'd resorted to his family's influence in the Ministry of Magic to gain an unfair edge over Cedric Diggory in the finals. The memory stung sharper than any spell, reminding him that true glory could never be borrowed, and that tonight's spectacle belonged entirely to Elvis and her dragon. Nothing like this would have happened before. But once Arthur Weasley and Madame Bones took the reins at the Ministry, everything changed. They'd launched an open campaign against the Old Guard, and in the ensuing battles, his family had been swept up in the crossfire. Now, with graduation on the horizon, he no longer feared being drafted straight into Ministry service. For the first time, he could pursue his true passion, Quidditch, without looking over his shoulder. He blamed it all on the tournament. If he'd never entered last year, or if he'd been wise enough to walk away when he had the chance, none of this would have fallen on his loved ones. That was why he despised champions, and Elvis in particular. The man's smug superiority grated on him. Still, for the moment, he clenched his teeth and stayed silent, refusing to let his bitterness spill out. Not a word. Special thanks to D. Kun for the monthly ticket and to everyone who's recommended and subscribed. Chapter 287, The Treasure on the Stone Platform. The camera cut back to Ryan. In one shadowed corner of the stadium's stone stands, a handful of seats remained empty, an oasis of calm untouched by the biting wind that swept across the arena. There, Luna had slipped off her shoes and stretched out her small, porcelain-like feet, letting the warm air caress them. Their soft glow reminded Ryan of freshly steamed meat buns, plump, tender, and still releasing gentle wisps of heat. He couldn't resist. As a boy named Joe Yi, he had walked to and from high school every day, and besides steaming bowls of fried noodles, hot meat buns had been his favorite treat. He'd clasped them in his hand, savoring their warmth. Now, pressing Luna's delicate foot against his chest felt like revisiting that simple pleasure, a harmless indulgence in nostalgia. After all, who could blame him when Luna herself preferred to go barefoot? "Why are you blushing?" he teased, tapping his finger against his nose in mock innocence. Luna gave her toes a quick wiggle and then snatched her foot away. "I'm cold," she mumbled, her cheeks still tinged with pink. Ryan only chuckled, oblivious to the hint she just dropped. "Are you cold?" Ryan asked softly, wrapping Luna in his arms to stifle her shivers. Behind them, 3 dragons descended gracefully, each bearing one of the remaining warriors as they touched down on the field's cloud-like surface. Luna drew in her breath, pouting playfully against Ryan's chest. "The wind was cold a moment ago," she murmured. "Now that everyone's here, could you maybe let go?" Her voice dipped into a hushed buzz. "You know what? Hermione just told me about this incredibly powerful spell she wants me to learn." At the mention of Hermione, Luna's entire demeanor shifted. The timid, wide-eyed girl Ryan knew melted away, replaced by a spirited spark, like a timid white rabbit suddenly baring its claws. Even though Luna's newly heightened magical instincts warned her to be cautious, something in Ryan's steady gaze made her believe him. She snuggled closer, nuzzling his chin. "What kind of magic are we talking about? I can learn anything. I don't even need it, but if Hermione has it, then I have to have it too. No, better yet, I want to be the best. After all, per outshines Crookshanks, right? Ryan smiled, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. Oh, in that case, you're going to have to shed a lot more water. No, I mean actually put in some effort. Hermione's voice was sharp, insistent. My gut told me something was off, but looking at her, my perfect opposite, a mirror image turned upside down, sent a jolt of tension up my spine. Still, she squared her shoulders and repeated, I want it now. Ryan's grin spread. You're not even going to watch the match. Luna burrowed closer into his arms, her words muffled against his chest. No, Fleur's going to win for sure. I can't stand her. Before I could react, the two of them wavered and vanished, disapparating into thin air. Down on the Quidditch pitch, an empty seat appeared at the edge of the stands. There, Hermione was suddenly perched in Ryan's lap. I blinked in surprise. When had that space opened up? But my attention snapped skyward to Fleur. Her fierce beauty and unshakable confidence practically radiated from her tangled hair and determined eyes. She kicked off on her battered broomstick, weaving through the four hovering referees high above the pitch. Nearby, Arthur Weasley drifted on a curious white cloud. With a flourish of his hand and a booming amplification charm, he bellowed into the stands. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Moments ago, I announced the match was about to begin. Now I'm here to end it. You see, we've just confiscated the most precious possessions of our four players. We hid them in the stadium. At those words, Fleur's brow creased. Her pale blue eyes swept the stands as if she could spot their hidden charge by sight alone. Ryan will be all right, she murmured. Harry shook his head and lowered his voice. Why do you assume it's Ryan? Do you truly believe he could hide among ordinary muggles without being discovered? I'm far more worried about my sister, Gabrielle. Fleur arched an eyebrow, but she hesitated. Harry was Ryan's younger brother, after all. She was about to argue when she sensed movement at her flanks. Victor Krum and Elvis, who'd been scanning the arena for their own targets, were subtly closing in on them. A few miles away at the Leaky Cauldron, a crowd of witches and wizards pressed around a television, goblets in hand. The boisterous cheer tapered off as they noticed Fleur and Harry on screen. Isn't that Harry Potter chatting up the French beauty? I thought he was engaged. No, that's Arthur Weasley's youngest daughter. She's in the Order, like Diggle. Diggle? You mean Roderick Diggle? He's now Director of Magical Law Enforcement. Glasses clinked nervously. With the entire wizarding community watching the broadcast, every eye was on Harry and Fleur. The Office for the Prohibition of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts, where I'd gone to register my modified game console just 2 days ago, is directly under his authority. You really have no clue, do you? Retorted the wizard across the table. He used to work in that very department. I even got my nephew, Slack, a position there. You're talking to the uncle of the future director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Their boasting died away almost as quickly as it had flared, because on the pub's enchanted television screen, the camera had shifted to Albus Dumbledore. At the sight of his familiar silver beard and half-moon spectacles, every drinker in the Leaky Cauldron, or whatever tucked-away tavern they occupied, suddenly straightened in their seats. Many had once been his students, sitting spellbound in defense against the dark arts or transfiguration classes. Even now, his very presence commanded respect. On the screen, Dumbledore rose. I've just learned that some of the competitors have already begun seeking out their treasures, he announced, voice carrying easily to every corner of the bar. They've been whispering among themselves, and I'm certain the spectators are eager to discover what these so-called treasures might be. Where there had been lively chatter, an anticipatory hush fell. The murmurs from the stadium stands died away, too. A hush so complete that, elsewhere, you could almost hear the clink of glass as Dumbledore drew his wand and pointed it toward the sky. A flawless white marble platform suddenly materialized above them, blotting out the sun. On every screen in the stadium, and on the handheld TVs in the crowd, the image dimmed as the platform descended, rotating slowly to remain perfectly level. Then it halted. One by one, long rectangular slabs of marble peeled away from its edge and drifted downward, locking into place as half-suspended steps that led toward the grassy field below. The cameras pulled back, revealing the full scale of the structure, 4 massive reliefs carved into the platform's face. As the audience watched in stunned silence, one carving, a serene woman, shifted before their eyes. Feathers erupted across her arms, her face elongated into a sharp beak, and she transformed into a strange bird-headed creature perched atop the central totem pillar. Encircling that pillar were 4 smaller stone columns, and bound to each was a young witch. They stood in a line, arranged roughly from oldest to youngest. At the far left was a tall, black-haired girl in Hogwarts robes bearing the Slytherin crest. Beside her stood a slightly shorter witch in a vibrant green robe. Her round cheeks and wide eyes marked her clearly as a 4th-year student. Next came Ginny Weasley, her flaming red hair impossible to miss as it tumbled in unruly curls around her shoulders. The final girl, no older than 11 or 12, trembled at the far right, her face pale with fear. A hush fell over the stadium as the bird woman raised her arms. Then, in a voice that echoed like wind through hollow reeds, she spoke, "Welcome, mortals, to the trial of the 4 sisters. Let the reckoning begin." The last figure was an 8-year-old girl whose silver blonde hair bloomed around her like a cloud, immediately marking her as the sister of the champion, Fleur Delacour. All 4 lay there as if in a deep, dreamless sleep, their heads nodding forward and resting limply on their shoulders. Chapter 701, The Ritual to Achieve Immortality. Please stop, Miss Dracula, and you, Mr. Potter. At Dumbledore's words, the cameras swung back to the combatants. Victor Krum and Irvis, momentarily forgetting themselves, nearly took a step towards the stone staircase that hovered in midair. Before they could advance, Irvis tugged on Krum's arm and held him back. "The hostages are all safe," Dumbledore said, meeting the glare of a livid Fleur Delacour. "In fact, they're asleep, soundly, I promise you. Though their heads droop against their chests, they won't wake with stiff necks. Right now, they're living the most beautiful, most peaceful dream of their lives." Harry came to a halt and stared at Dumbledore, who rested serenely on his cloud of white mist. There was something peculiarly familiar in the headmaster's tone, gentle and protective, like an older brother reassuring his little sister. Harry couldn't help but feel the promise was spoken with absolute certainty. And, of course, he knew that Dumbledore did have a younger brother, Aberforth, the one the Daily Prophet had mentioned when profiling the Order of the Phoenix. Albus Dumbledore's sharp eyes had already picked up on Fleur's concern for her sister, and he was quick to point it out, drawing Harry's attention as well. A look of relief washed over Fleur's face, which had moments before been clouded by worry, and she slipped her wand securely into its holster. Dumbledore caught the movement, gave a knowing smile, and addressed the gathered champions. "All right, warriors, prepare yourselves. As Arthur mentioned earlier, our special guest is about to make his entrance." In the stadium, and on countless screens broadcasting the event, the air crackled with anticipation. The cameras swung back to the 4 champions arrayed before their dragons. No sooner had Dumbledore finished speaking than Irvis, stationed at the far end, thrust out his arm and let loose a deep, resonant cry in the ancient tongue of the Andes, directing it at his Peruvian viper-tooth. A split second later, Victor Krum answered with his own guttural shout, the Bulgarian war cry echoing across the field. Harry didn't pause to wonder where his rivals had learned their chants. He only knew that, to shield his Hungarian horntail from the bewitching sway of the Vila soon to appear, he needed his own rallying call. Drawing on the Far Eastern wind magic techniques he'd encountered in Ryan's dream world, he inhaled deeply, still haunted by the phantom sting of a blade grazing his throat, and threw his voice into a crisp, single word, "Hasaki." The shout cut the tension like a drawn sword, steeling him for whatever came next. It happened so quickly that he died before he even felt the pain. Back in the arena, Farong stood perfectly still, arms crossed, as the remaining 3 warriors issued their commands. On cue, the fire dragon blinked once and closed its eyes, as if it, too, were merely part of a staged performance rather than a living weapon. High above, Mrs. Maxim wore a rare look of melancholy and concern. At her side, Karkaroff leaned in and murmured tauntingly, "Madam, did you really think a half-blood could overcome so many purebloods? Or were you relying on the blessing of our Durmstrang magic circle?" A crackle of energy filled the air, and once again a familiar sight unfolded. From a small drifting cloud fell a lump of flesh-colored ooze swaddled in a white fur coat. Pinkish globs splattered across the cloud's surface and coalesced around the coat until, at last, the mass shifted, and where a face should have been, a writhing cluster of octopus-like tentacles burst forth. A camera swept across the stands, capturing the spectators' faces. Not a single person looked surprised, as though grotesque transformations like this had become just another day's entertainment. They say no one here actually wanted to see Karkaroff cursed, yet when his vicious taunt flashed across the giant screens, even the golden snitch relayed it live, the reaction was electric. Insults about blood purity are about as welcome in the wizarding world as a rogue bludger, and old grudges rekindle quickly when someone crosses that line. Still, most of the conversation wasn't about the taunt so much as the shock that Karkaroff was still alive. High above, on the hovering white cloud platform, Professor Dumbledore leapt to his feet, clearly ready to claim Karkaroff's body. When the headmaster's body struck the ground, it collapsed into a viscous, muddy mess. Every witness saw it. But enchanted polymerization charms later proved that the mud was almost entirely him, and yet his severed head, unrecognizable, shattered, remained alive, eyes blinking, lips whispering, an unintelligible stream of magic. It was a breakthrough no one had anticipated. If this curse could be studied, if you could somehow strip away the flesh in that monstrous tentacled visage, it suggested a path to partial immortality. A body reduced to its pure magical essence, that persisting even after gruesome dismemberment, a new frontier of ritual magic. From the very front row of the Slytherin stands, Severus Snape rose to his feet, excitement gleaming in his dark eyes. "Albus," he called, voice ringing across the courtyard, "I urge you, do not remove the curse from Karkaroff. What we witness today surpasses anything in recorded magic. We cannot, and must not, attempt to harness it." Silence fell as Dumbledore regarded Snape over his half-moon spectacles, the thunder of the crowd echoing below. Everyone knew the headmaster was weighing far more than just academic curiosity. The fate of a hated man, the lure of forbidden power, and the very nature of life and death itself all hung in the balance. "I think it's best if we leave things as they are for now," Dumbledore said quietly, watching Severus Snape's taut grip on his wand. He turned to Snape. "Severus, lower your wand and take a seat. Karkaroff is not your prisoner." Snape's eyes flickered between Dumbledore and Karkaroff, whose once human features had become twisted, veins standing out beneath pale, stretched skin. To everyone's surprise, Karkaroff spoke in a fractured voice, each word measured. "I understand my condition perfectly well. If no one interferes, I can remain like this indefinitely. Severus was right. Durmstrang's reputation rests on our study of the dark arts. It's crucial to our mission, so please refrain from attacking me and allow Professor Barker," he paused as if tasting the name, "and me to work together to find a remedy." A hush fell over the group. Dumbledore exchanged a long look with Snape. Even Severus could not argue with Karkaroff's request. The man was volunteering himself as a test subject. With a resigned nod, Dumbledore sank onto a stone bench. At once, one of the Durmstrang students, who had led them through the corridors, darted forward and knelt by Karkaroff's side. The student unfurled a sheet of parchment and dipped his quill in ink. As he wrote furiously, the letters glowed briefly before the paper folded and multiplied, transforming into a cascade of 1,000 delicate cranes. They lifted off the ground, their silver wings catching the moonlight as they soared toward the great ship moored at the center of the Black Lake. Severus watched in grim fascination while the cranes vanished into the misty night. "She's loyal to the end," the student murmured, stepping back. "Karkaroff has volunteered himself as Professor Barker's research subject, Grindelwald, in his external guise." Dumbledore closed his eyes and clasped his hands. The long night ahead promised discoveries and dangers none of them were prepared for. He doesn't mind parading around Europe in that ridiculous getup. In an almost deserted corner of the stands, Kate let out an exasperated sigh. "Strictly speaking, it isn't just Europe," Ryan pointed out with a shrug. "They're broadcasting in Europe, America, and even Moon City, Atlantis." "Then why isn't India included?" Penelope asked, puzzled. "We signed deals with Indian TV networks. The campaign was a huge success there." Ryan frowned. Funny, didn't everybody used to the supply Enkai of India as part of the UK? My bet is that by 2022, they'll effectively be running Britain. Preposterous, Kate and Penelope exclaimed in unison. Although both were witches from the magical community, they'd grown up steeped in old colonial attitudes, an unconscious contempt for India they'd never questioned. Ryan looked from one to the other. So you're saying I'm to blame for this so-called curse? Penelope's eyes flashed. Need I say more? They even claim I mocked Fleur. They've dragged my name into Karkaroff's scandals, blamed me for the rumor about Dumbledore's secret child, all because I once called Dumbledore my idol. It looks like only a single line was provided. Could you please share the full chapter text that you'd like rewritten? Once I have the complete passage, I can transform it into a polished, idiomatic English version. Chapter 289, Irresistible Charm. Look, Fleur's family has just arrived, Ryan called out with a grin, seizing the chance to change the subject and tease Fleur once more. The chilly tension in Katie's and Penelope's eyes instantly thawed. It was a relief. After all the contest's wild twists, things had been teetering so close to a gruesome spectacle that even Snape, tasked with evaluating a foreign headmistress, would have winced. Dumbledore raised his wand again, signaling that the next stage was about to begin. Almost at once, the artificial blanket of white clouds that formed the aerial arena dissolved into mist. Slowly, massive stone platforms emerged, hovering in midair. Between them, 4 winding pathways of glowing orange light snaked through the brilliant blue sky. Perched on the edges of each platform floated dozens of tiny winged keys. They shimmered like jeweled birds, their delicate wings beating in unison as they flitted about. Harry couldn't help glancing at Professor Flitwick beside him. The little charms master stood a full inch taller, his eyes shining with pride at the enchanting spectacle Dumbledore had revealed. A sudden ripple of gasps and excited whispers swept through the crowd. Harry wheeled around to face the stone platform at the center of the arena. Dark clouds that had gathered above the platform began to swirl away, dissipating like smoke caught in a breeze. As the last wisp vanished, a transparent glass dome materialized with a soft shimmer. Inside stood the villa. They were more astonishingly beautiful than anything Harry had ever imagined. He'd seen pictures of them in dusty magical treatises, but those illustrations had failed utterly to capture their otherworldly allure. Compared to them, even the exquisite hibiscus seemed merely charming, not supernatural. These villa, by contrast, could never be mistaken for ordinary humans. Their skin gleamed pale and smooth, as if kissed by moonlight. Their hair drifted behind them in slow, weightless waves, though there was no breeze. And their eyes, each pair like polished emeralds, held an uncanny power. Harry felt his thoughts grow sluggish at the sight of them, as if those liquid depths could freeze his mind and undo his will. The very air around the platform seemed to sweeten, charged with an almost tangible enchantment. Even the noonday sun felt dim in comparison. Yet despite their dazzling radiance, the villa's beauty was soft and subtle, the curve of a smile half hidden, a tilt of the head filled with secret depth. Their expressions shifted from playful mischief to something darker and more seductive, as though they were fragments of moonlight briefly stepping into mortal sight. Then, in perfect unison, they began to dance. Their movements were graceful and hypnotic, an entrancing display that left the audience breathless and utterly enthralled. The villa's dance spiraled into a frenzy, their graceful silhouettes blurring as they spun ever faster. Harry's head swam with dizzy, half-formed notions. He wanted to do something spectacular, and he wanted to do it now. Something dramatic, like leaping straight off the stone dais. But would that be thrilling enough? A weary sigh drifted down from above. "Wake up!" The voice carried a sharp edge that set Harry's teeth on edge. Immediately, the villa halted mid-twirl. Harry blinked, bewildered, and realized his own body had shifted into a sprinting stance without his consent. Beside him, Elvis pressed against Crumb, chest thrust forward, as though already basking in a wave of cheers that existed only in his imagination. Fleur Delacour alone remained unmoved, her expression coolly indifferent. High overhead, the judging panel and the hovering professors showed no sign of surprise. Half a world away, at the Burrow, Mrs. Weasley stared at her kitchen television in shock and slowly lowered her wand. But back in the stadium, the audience erupted in furious shouts. "Keep going!" The students clamored for the performance to continue. In the leaky cauldron, the din of rattling glasses and scolding voices grew louder by the second. Finally, the camera cut away from the frozen villa and the trio on the dais to frame Albus Dumbledore's kindly, concerned face. They're the special guests of today's contest, the villa. Their allure is unparalleled. They can ensnare the hearts of anyone who values beauty. But remember, beauty is fleeting. It doesn't define all of life. You've seen their power before. Now watch closely. Every magic circle carved into these stone platforms will soon spring to life, and the villa will dance once more. But don't celebrate just yet. As the circles ignite, their irresistible charm will be suppressed. Only one pair of eyes will remain unaffected, the fire dragon's, for it burns with anti-magic sight. From her perch on the stage, Kate frowned in confusion. Why suppress their magic instead of transforming it? And why does Harry still fall under their spell? After all your enhancements, isn't he your greatest masterpiece? How could a group of villa— A group, the speaker interrupted with a sharp laugh. This isn't the same affair as the World Cup performance. Here there are barely 100 dancers active at any one time, though nearly 1,000 villa attend in total. And we're not transforming their magic because Durmstrang simply doesn't possess that capability. Charm is more than a spell. It's the unpredictable force born from their divine beauty, fused with innate magic. That kind of power can't be bottled, only quelled. A hush fell over the arena as the first runes glowed on the stone beneath the dancers' feet. Outside, the fire dragon's eyes smoldered with eldritch flame, unblinking as they took in every detail and felt nothing. As neighbors across the lake, the students of Durmstrang had long embraced rigorous physical training. Nearly every one of them was broad-shouldered and muscle-bound. And yet, despite their imposing strength, even these hardened youth were not immune to the power of a villa's allure. A single glance could unsettle a man's senses, robbing him of his composure, or worse, his virility. It was this very vulnerability that inspired the creation of the countercharms on display before us, a simple yet ingenious magic circle. Its underlying principle is straightforward. We cannot dull a villa's natural beauty, Professor Orlovsky explained as he traced an intricate ring of runes on the chamber floor. So instead, we change our own perception of it. Human vision, he reminded us, depends entirely on light entering the eye and forming an image on the retina. This circle, however, acts like a carnival mirror, warping and refracting incoming light so that anyone standing within its bounds sees the villa's perfect features reduced to something decidedly ordinary, her transcendent grace seemingly drained away. But what about creatures that see through enchantments? I asked. Like fire dragons, I thought they could bypass ordinary illusions. Indeed, Orlovsky nodded. Fire dragons don't rely on light in the same way humans do. Their eyesight reads the magical resonance field that permeates our world. Illusions create distortions in that field, which a dragon perceives just as clearly as you or I spot ripples on water. I shifted uncomfortably. And where does that leave me? I'm no dragon. Precisely, he smiled. You're still learning. Think of a Dementor's effect. Those with painful memories suffer most acutely under its presence. In the same way, a villa's charm preys on the deepest longings of her observer. Without a countermeasure, whether a protective enchantment or this very circle, even the stoutest wizard can find himself ensnared. He tapped the last rune into place and stood back. Step inside, and you'll see for yourself. One by one, my classmates entered the circle and returned to us unharmed, some even shrugging off their previous jitteriness. Outside its border, the villa's smile still glowed with supernatural radiance, but within, it was merely a pleasant if unremarkable expression. The magic had done its work. I've rarely had much physical contact with women, never experienced any unforgettable romantic love. So anyone still craving that kind of relationship is especially vulnerable to a villa's charms. Most of our professors are either hopelessly single, utterly devoted to one partner, so solidly heterosexual you'd never suspect otherwise, or they'd sooner dote on magical creatures than on human women. They all have an eye for beauty, of course, but unless you're a master of occlumency, or you've endured the Imperious curse, you won't resist a villa's allure. Kate frowned, clearly puzzled. Wait, so Harry Potter can't use occlumency against them? Ryan laughed. He can, but in this exhibition match, he deliberately let himself slip. His subconscious convinced him it was harmless to bask in a little beauty, and with the students hollering from the stands, and Clum and Irvis egging him on, he really had no incentive to stay guarded. If it had been a serious duel, though, he wouldn't have been fazed for a second. At that moment, Professor Dumbledore took his seat on the podium, and the murmuring in the great hall died away. Arthur Weasley rose to his feet and surveyed the assembled fighters with quiet authority. "Our champions are in position," he announced. "At the sound of my whistle, the second task begins. You will have exactly 1 hour to overcome every obstacle and return here to the arena, where the hostages await you on the stone platform. On my count, 1, 2, 3. He raised his arm and let out a sharp, piercing whistle that carried across the field, signaling the start of the challenge. Honestly, I still don't understand why some protagonists in the Harry Potter novels harbor such animosity toward Vila. Setting aside my own redesign ideas, the original conception of a Vila embodies an otherworldly perfection, a true level 10 beauty, utterly beyond anything you could encounter in real life or online. Chapter 230, Leading Furong. The 4 stone platforms, draped in ribbons of orange and yellow silk, formed a circle around a central dais. There, the Vilas began to dance once more. A haunting melody rose around the arena, their ethereal voices carrying these chilling words. "We have taken your most beloved child. You have but 1 hour to reclaim them." Yet this time, their beauty no longer held its former sway. Their smiles were still delicate and inviting, but the magic in their dance had faded, no longer capable of bewitching onlookers. As if freed from a spell, the great projection screens that ringed the arena shifted focus, partitioning into 4 quadrants. Each pane now showcased one of the champions and the dragons they faced. In the first, the Milu venom-toothed dragon, its scales like burnished brass arched its mighty wings. In the second, the Hebridean Islands black dragon flexed its talons, smoke curling from its nostrils. The third pane revealed a fire dragon from Australia, its opal-flecked eyes gleaming like a rainbow in sunlight. And the fourth held Fleur Delacour, standing motionless, her gaze fixed on the beast before her. Fleur did not raise her wand. Yet, as if moved by some subtle will of her own, the Australian fire dragon answered her unspoken command. With a fierce beat of its wings, it lifted into the air and hurtled straight for the arena's winding track. The roar of the crowd swelled, but all eyes remained trained on Fleur and her dragon, on the impossible bond between them, and on the desperate race that lay ahead. "You have 1 hour." The words echoed again through every heart, and the contest truly began. Krum and Irvis, by contrast, looked tense and awkward in the air. Their dragon's flight was anything but smooth, more like stop-motion animation than a seamless glide. Every turn required a shouted command before the creature would budge, and even aboard the fastest 2-headed fire dragon, the Bulgarian pair trailed Fleur by a full beat. By the time they'd corrected their angle and lined up with the course, Fleur had already swept into the leftmost inlet of the Australian oval eye. As her dragon passed, the thin orange ribbon marking that track glowed briefly, then shifted to a rich sapphire blue in her wake. Perched on the referee's platform, Mr. Weasley's voice boomed through the stadium. "Attention competitors! Each track in this tournament is charmed to register the first dragon and rider team that enters. Under no circumstances may you cross into a track that is not yours. If you are unhorsed, you must return to the point where you first crossed the boundary. No shortcuts." He paused, eyes sweeping the field. Curiously, though, our youngest contestant has yet to launch. It seems he's, how shall I put it, engaged in a bit of magic of his own. Professor Dumbledore, standing at Mr. Weasley's side, inclined his head thoughtfully. "You might not know," he said quietly, "but we'd slipped the champion's fire drake figurine a hidden enchantment, and Harry seemed to have spotted it." A hush rippled through the grandstands and the television commentary booths as Harry froze in place. Seconds later, the crowd erupted again, showering him with praise. They watched the contestant on the field step forward and saw the fire drake close its eyes in response. Recalling Professor Dumbledore's remark that only true dragons are immune to Vila charm, most spectators concluded that the cluster of Vila had affected the beast. and that the secret spell in the figurine must have neutralized their allure. Speculation ran wild. Some argued that Fleur Delacour, now out front, must have discovered the same enchantment. After all, she hadn't been dazzled by any vila, and perhaps that was when she cast her countercharm. With the referee's signal, she could leap onto her drake and surge ahead. In that moment, a dozen theories flashed through the stands, each more inventive than the last. Ryan inclined to trust Draco more than anyone. There he stood, cradling Pansy in his arms and chatting easily with their circle, of Slytherins. He caught Ryan's eye and lowered his voice. "Did you notice what they did before the competition started?" Draco asked. "They made a big show of ranking the dragons by speed, then demonstrating the vila's allure when left alone. The message was clear. The smaller the dragon, the faster it flies. By that logic, Irvas of Castrupshe should have the advantage. But it doesn't add up." Ryan frowned. "Why not?" "In the first individual challenge, we saw how dangerous a dragon could be to a wizard," Draco continued. The Peruvian viper-tooth wasn't the largest beast out there, yet Harry's Hungarian horntail turned out to be both the slowest and deadliest. That kind of setup is wildly unbalanced. I half expected the stone ledges on those floating platforms to be studded with magical traps, enchanted snare spells that punish smaller creatures more. That would level the playing field, testing the champions' spell work as much as their dragons. He gestured to the arena, where the next trial's obstacles were being raised. Ryan leaned forward, curious. Then Draco's eyes went wide. "Wait, what's that?" he breathed. Together, they peered through the haze of enchantment and torchlight at the newly erected challenge. Strange, glimmering runes danced along the edges of the platforms, runes Ryan had never seen before. A hush swept through the crowd as murmurs rose. This trial would be unlike any they'd faced before. Draco's grip on Pansy tightened slightly, and he glanced at Ryan with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Looks like Hogwarts has a few surprises left for us." And in that moment, every doubt about dragon sizes and speed rankings vanished, replaced by the thrilling uncertainty of the magic yet to come. Since the other three champions hadn't yet reached the first floating stone ledge, where a hidden magical trap might lie, the students who had been listening intently to the commentator suddenly turned their eyes to the suspended projection screens. In the lower right window flickered Harry's feed. Perched atop the ferocious Hungarian horntail, Harry at last opened his eyes, now glowing a vivid yellow like an animal's pupils. At that moment, Snape, sitting in the front row of the Slytherin stands, let out an unrestrained roar, though nobody seemed to notice him. Only Dumbledore, seated on a half-obscured cloud above the crowd, cast one guarded glance before fixing his attention back on Harry. Under his breath he murmured, "Marvelous, truly marvelous." Then, in a breathtaking instant, the Hungarian horntail unfurled its massive wings and lunged toward the far-right track with every ounce of strength it had. Miss Fleur Dracula, by contrast, had clearly chosen a very different tactic from Harry. Her own mount, the sleek austral oval eye, glided forward with serene composure, its eyes remaining gently closed as it pressed steadily onward. Miss Dracula's dragon hovered at the starting line, its opalescent eyes wide and gleaming with anticipation. Close on her heels came Elvas aboard the Peruvian viper-tooth, undeniably the swiftest mount in the field, but this contest was more than a straight race. Ahead lay a gauntlet of magical traps, ready to test the skill and nerve of the four warrior riders. As Harry Potter's dragon shot forward, the silk cord marking his lane flickered from white to jet black. One of the competition's clever cues, keyed to the color of each rider's uniform. From ringside, Arthur Weasley's voice crackled over the loudspeakers, a corrected, enlivened commentary replacing the half-baked training rounds of old. "See that silk turn black?" he asked, drawing in the less initiated spectators. "Each dragon's lane shifts hue as they pass, matching their riders' colors and alerting us to any trickery ahead. And now, look sharp! Miss Dracula is closing in on the first stone platform." On the field, Furong sat astride her fire dragon, wind whipping through her hair as they blazed toward the same looming platform. But as they neared, the dragon's speed ground to a halt, its claws scrabbling for purchase on the ancient rune-carved surface. Across the track, the others slowed too, some halting altogether, as the first magical trap asserted its power. Stones rumbled, runes glowed. The true challenge had begun. It felt as though they were flying through an invisible swamp, the air itself dragging at the fire dragon's wings. Each beat grew more labored, their altitude sputtering under the weight of some unseen force. Beside her, a stone platform slid into position, its surface shifting to match the dragon's flight path. Perched upon the platform was Avila, her cool gaze betraying nothing but a hint of disdain. The rider frowned at the sight. Then her eyes flicked to the swarm of keys orbiting the platform. The solution was clear. She would have to leap onto the moving stone. And hidden among those dancing keys, she suspected, lay the key, quite literally, to breaking the quagmire that held the fire dragon in its grip. Chapter 231, Race to Hell Mode. The arena announcer's voice echoed over the roar of the crowd. Beauxbaton's own Dracula has landed on the next stone platform. Can she locate the key to dispel the magical trap before the fire dragon takes flight again? Wait, Castruptia's Irvis seems to have called off the beast's advance, slowing it considerably. Is he conserving its strength for the upcoming trial? Fleur ignored the running commentary. To onlookers, she appeared aloof, even disdainful of her fellow competitors, but that was merely part of her game. She was fiercely driven by victory and understood that an intimidating facade could throw opponents off their stride. Inwardly, her attention was fixed on the cluster of keys scattered across the platform. Could she obliterate them with a thunderbolt blast, or perhaps snatch them all at once with a powerful binding spell? Though the public saw only a flicker of hesitation, Fleur's mind raced through a dozen strategies in the time it took for a heartbeat to pass. With only an hour allotted for the competition, and countless stone platforms still to traverse, both brute force and cunning subterfuge might carry her to success. Yet she could not forget the three challengers hot on her heels, each waiting for a misstep. Determined, she steadied her breath, weighed her options, and prepared to strike. The race to hell mode had only just begun, and every second counted. They'd wondered whether she might shatter the relic using her own hidden techniques, yet brute force risked too much confusion. Why not simply destroy every trace? Then again, what if she'd uncovered something vital? Buying time could prove wiser than rash violence. A ripple of astonishment ran through the stands. Look, what magic is that? Why isn't she drawing a wand? At the center of the arena, Fleur was dancing. Her silvery blonde hair fanned out with each graceful turn, and around her swirled dozens of jewel-bright keys, each one alight with illusory magic. They fluttered like butterflies around the carved hibiscus at her feet, their glow pulsing in time with her steps. Then, without warning, she halted and raised her right hand. A single sapphire blue key detached from the circle and glided to rest on her palm. The moment its cold metal touched her fingertips, the stone platform shuddered and stopped. High above, the villa within their glass dome froze mid-twirl, their spellbound dance cut abruptly silent. Fleur's sea-green eyes widened in both surprise and admiration. Hibiscus's magic, it seemed, was more formidable than anyone had imagined. Below them, the Australian opal eye, once a whirlwind of uncontrolled power, surged forward in a sudden burst of speed. But before it could reach the platform, its iridescent wings folded, and with a soft, mournful sigh, it began to retreat. Fleur vaulted onto the dragon's back once more and soared toward the next stone platform. On the opposite side, Irvis, now in second place, was closing in on the first platform. Unlike Furong's earlier attempt, the Peruvian viper-toothed dragon balked as it neared the quagmire, almost coming to a complete stop. The platform tethered to it hung motionless in midair. Just when everyone expected Irvis to leap safely aboard, he whipped out his wand and pointed it at himself. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then, with a sharp snap of the dragon's neck, Irvis was hurled clear off the platform. Gasps of shock echoed from the students. Castruptia's supporters sprang to their feet. Referee Mrs. Volkanova gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Yet Irvis did not plummet straight down. Instead, he drifted through the air, swaying like a slender willow leaf. A voice rang out from the stands. Amazing! Irvis of Castruptia saw the viper-toothed dragon's hesitation and cast a slow spell on himself. Then, at the same moment, issued a second, more complex command. Look, the Peruvian viper-tooth is moving again. The Peruvian viper-tooth shifted its massive head downward and cracked one sleepy eye open. What a sight! It had just snatched Ed Victor Krum from the sky, seating him awkwardly on its snout. Then, with a low rumble, the dragon closed its eye again and drifted back toward slumber. Harry seized the moment. With Krum temporarily out of the running, he surged into second place and spurred the Hungarian horntail toward the first stone platform. Ahead of him, Fleur Delacour was already angling toward her own second marker. Harry and the horntail swooped low toward the murky quagmire between the platforms, but a sudden roar of wind blasted them off course. A thick wall of air shoved Harry backward, wings and tail feathers snapping in the gale. The horntail's speed barely faltered, but Harry's aim wavered. "Thunderbolt blast!" he cried, thrusting his wand at the sky. A jagged bolt of blue-white energy arced into the swarm of winged keys. They chittered in alarm, folding their feathery wings to dodge the spell. Harry recognized Professor Flitwick's handiwork at once. These were no ordinary keys. He thought back to his first year when Quirrell, secretly possessed by Voldemort, had used Flitwick's own enchantments on the restricted fourth floor. The plan had been to trap Harry with the Sorcerer's Stone, force Dumbledore into a rescue, and expose the headmaster to Voldemort's machinations. The lesson had stuck. In magic, everything must be anticipated and prioritized. Now, heart-pounding, Harry watched the keys swirl above the first platform. He had one chance to break their formation and seize the right one. The tournament, and his chance to protect his friends from the Dark Lord's designs, depended on it. Dumbledore had warned Ron about this the previous summer, during their meeting at the mansion on number 10 Rose Street. That was exactly why the magical defenses here were so rudimentary, simple enough that even a possessed Quirrell could force his way through. But today, the master steered his fire dragon down the entire course with its eyes closed. A trap this basic shouldn't have posed any real challenge. They could afford to take a bolder, more direct approach. Sure enough, when the explosion spell detonated, a sharp crackle echoed through the chamber. As the smoke dispersed, the oppressive stillness lifted, and the Vila dancers perched on the stone dice froze in mid-twirl. Ervas, still astride his fire dragon and guiding it with quiet commands, braced himself to dive back into the course. Not far behind him, Krum followed, closing in on the first stone platform. He exhaled in relief. The enchanted keys and wards were neutralized. Far from being a handicap, their dragon's compact size now translated directly into blistering speed. Every time his dragon tore through one of those floating stone platforms, the Vila dancing atop it froze mid-step. With each shattered slab, another group of them went silent, stripping away the glamour that blinds a dragon. By the time the last platform fell, his beast could finally see clearly again. And that, Draco knew, was when Harry's advantage over the others would vanish, and when the real race would begin. Merlin's beard! Harry's panicking! Draco slapped his thigh from the stands. A whisper rippled through the students nearby. "What are you talking about?" "They're shaving off seconds, faster than even my goddess," someone answered. Draco cast a wry smile at his classmates. "Think about it. If you were Harry, there's no way you'd want to deal with all those enchanted platforms on your flight path. My dragon, on the other hand, isn't fooled by magical obstacles. Each time it blasts through a platform, another Vila drops off, and another layer of enchantment vanishes. By the final stretch, its eyes are clear, exactly when Krum and Ervas, with the two fastest dragons here, will surge ahead. And don't imagine Harry can just dismantle every trap on the way. It's not that simple. Remember the first champion? She used her own rare magic to snatch the golden key, almost certainly to keep any would-be copycats from learning her shortcuts. Harry's feint had been nothing more than a clever ruse. In reality, he simply unleashed a basic explosion charm, and at that moment, every trap designed to snare Charmanders proved utterly ineffective against Ervas and Krum. With that single, decisive spell, Harry had effectively switched the entire match into easy mode, dragging his opponents straight toward defeat. Chapter 232, 705, Harry wins the game. Draco wasn't the only one watching closely. The instant Ervas and Krum unleashed their explosive charms in rapid succession, most of the spectators in the stands realized what everyone had missed. Harry had skipped a crucial step. Even Ron noticed it eventually, though not in time to warn him. Ron had been glued to a half-empty broadcast screen strapped to his wrist. On that feed, the sequence went like this. Harry blasted away the last of the enchanted keys. The massive stone platform ground to a halt. Then, without warning, the camera cut away to Victor Krum and Ervas Dortas. In high-definition close-ups, their anxious frowns melted into triumphant grins as each explosion rocked the arena. The network even lingered on a slow-motion replay of the final detonation. No one watching that edited footage would suspect Harry of any misstep. Standing courtside as referee and color commentator, Mr. Arthur Weasley felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He saw Harry barreling toward victory and toward disaster, having overlooked a vital rule. Every fiber of his fatherly instinct urged him to point it out over the microphone, to save his son-in-law from an embarrassing mistake. Yet in his official capacity, fairness demanded his silence. He bit his lip and watched the boy press on, inwardly cursing the missed opportunity for a truly gripping duel. What had promised to be the match of the century was slipping into an anticlimax, and Mr. Weasley wondered if anyone would ever see the truth behind Harry's Pyrrhic triumph. Harry guided the fire dragon through the forbidden forest with uncanny confidence, the beast's blazing eyes firmly shut at his command. By all rights, his ride should have been riddled with mistakes. He'd only just cracked the ancient runes, and fire dragons aren't accustomed to the forest's seething enchantments. Almost every champion before him had wobbled in midair or tumbled off entirely, each near fall a ratings bonanza, their horrified faces broadcast for the delighted roar of the crowd. But Harry never flinched. Cameras trained on his calm expression only underscored what no one expected. He'd mastered a spell the judges had long deemed impossible, effectively shielding his dragon from the forest's magic. As a result, the audience sat up in muted surprise rather than wild applause. The judges themselves felt a twinge of embarrassment. After all, every spectacular slip would have driven ticket sales and ministry profits sky high. Behind him, Fleur Delacour and Victor Krum took a more cautious tack. Riding smaller fire dragons, they edged through the course at a deliberately measured pace, sidestepping every concealed trap the forest laid before them. Yet Harry's bold revelation changed the game. With his counter-curse now public, Delacour and Krum found their dragons gliding through the enchanted thickets just as securely. No sudden drops, no heart-stopping tumbles. At last, the contest had become a true test of skill and daring. With the dangers of the forest neutralized, all that remained was the race itself, and every spectator knew that nothing in this tournament would ever be the same again. It was astonishing how quickly the standings had shifted. Ervas, who'd never tasted defeat, now lagged behind, while Dracula had already clinched first place. Harry's hold on second was slipping, and Krum trailed in last. The contest had become pure chaos, every move up for grabs. Dracula still leads. The commentator's voice crackled through the arena speakers. She's scaling the second stone platform, brilliantly executed. A binding charm snapped shut her opponent, then an explosion jinx pinned her in place. Ervas has fallen to third, Krum remains in last, but wait, what's Harry doing? All eyes snapped to Harry. He drew his wand in one smooth motion, aimed it at the shimmering link tethering him to the massive fire dragon, and roared, "Protego Maxima, armor for protection." The sound that burst from him wasn't his usual tone. It was deep, resonant, like thunder rolling down a mound, Tainside, and it made the very air vibrate. At once, the previously invisible vertical barrier flared to life in brilliant blue light, materializing before everyone's eyes and standing firm against the dragon's searing flames. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen Harry summon such raw, undeniable power. As the Ravenclaw students gathered, Professor Flitwick, standing at the head of the group, couldn't help but mutter under his breath, "Super armor for protection? No, that's not it." In truth, the iron armor charm is far more than a simple defensive ward. The instant the caster utters the incantation, an invisible barrier sweeps around them. One that doesn't merely block an attack but launches its own counterstrike, rebounding the magic straight back at the aggressor. That sudden, forceful backlash is the spell's signature, and with enough finesse, a witch or wizard can even shrink the protective field to catch raindrops like a magical umbrella. Yet at its heart, iron armor is always an unseen suit of mystical plate. By all rights, such an ancient enchantment should burst into a pale blue glow when invoked. Still, Harry's wand work and chosen words tipped Professor Flitwick off immediately. This was the iron armor charm in action. He noted, without surprise, how Harry had reshaped the barrier into a streamlined matte shuttle-like form. But versatility has always been one of iron armor's greatest strengths. In the hands of a skilled spellcaster, the walls of energy can be molded into any shape, even a full suit of gleaming, bulletproof armor worthy of its legendary name. On the other side of the arena, the Slytherins, and every Ravenclaw nearby, had turned to Draco, captivated. He'd nailed every prediction so far, thanks to a few pro-level tips he'd picked up, and even Arthur Weasley had taken notice. Naturally, Draco refused to explain his secret. He didn't want the other champions catching on. "Have you taken Defense Against the Dark Arts?" Draco asked, his lips curving into a confident smile. "We covered aerodynamics in our last lesson. Haven't you noticed how much faster Harry's broom is now? He's found a way to turn what used to slow him down into an advantage." He stopped himself there. "That's all I'll say. Watch and see. I'll count down. 3, 2, 1. The instant he hit one, the commentator's voice crackled through every loudspeaker. Remarkably, Harry hasn't triggered the trap on the stone platform. He's actually taken flight, and fast too. Look, Shitai's broom is streaking through the air, and even the Hungarian tree-front dragon isn't slowed by the quagmire. Yet Harry still hasn't broken the enchantment. On the giant screens facing Victor Krum and the Bulgarian stands, the camera zoomed in on their faces. In a heartbeat, both Krum and his supporters went from relaxed confidence to stunned shock. Draco Malfoy couldn't hide his smirk. "Take a look at Krum and Elvis," he drawled. "They've just realized there's no way to let their dragons open their eyes in the final stretch. If their dragons do peak, they'll obliterate the enchantment on Harry's stone platform, and as long as that magic holds, the Vila will keep dancing. That means Krum and Elvis are at a serious disadvantage, unless, in that split second when the dragon's eyes reopen, they somehow surge to the exact same speed as Harry." A spectator called out, "But what if they try to be underhanded and blast the keys orbiting Harry's platform?" Draco waved a dismissive hand. Weasley made it clear, each rider can only fly his own track. Even on a fire dragon trembling with closed eyes, you're talking about firing a spell across roughly 150 feet and nailing every single key circling Harry's stone base? Impossible. Besides, as long as those keys remain intact, the platform's magic will synchronize only with Harry's dragon. The other riders are stuck on their own tracks, moving at different speeds. Draco's expression darkened as he frowned. "My only concern," he said, voice low, "is what happens if Harry doesn't dispel the enchantment on each stone platform. Or moving on, won't the anti-air barrier grow stronger by the next platform? What if 2 or even more stone platforms end up flying alongside him? In that case, Harry could only break the magic on one platform at a time. And with just a dozen Vila left, can their dance really sway the fire dragon?" Chapter 706, The Soaring Humanoid Fire Dragon. Draco's worst fears never materialized. When the trailing stone platform slammed into the one ahead, the front platform jolted once, then resumed its steady glide, as if it had barely noticed the impact. Its companion, however, came to an abrupt halt, as though the collision had never happened at all. Harry peered down at his hands, still gripping the reins of the fire dragon. He knew much of this miracle was owed to his new shuttle-shaped armor. Its sleek, aerodynamic design sliced cleanly through the wind. Even Shitai's powerful airwall spell, meant to buffet and slow any opponent, proved useless against a creature so infused with elemental flame. That said, the Hungarian horntail, nicknamed Shufeng by the spectators, was unfortunately the slowest of the 4 combat dragons. Meanwhile, Irvas and Krum, perched high on their own beasts, were demolishing the magical locking mechanisms at a blistering pace. Their dragons, now confident enough to fly with closed eyes, had begun to unleash their full fiery might. Harry felt the distance shrink between himself and the penultimate stone platform. Even Irvas was drawing dangerously close. He urged Shufeng upward, digging his heels into its scaled sides. The dragon's wings beat harder, sending a swirl of embers trailing into the sky. From behind him came a taunt. "Fleur is sure to win, isn't she?" Katie scoffed, leaning over the edge of her platform. "Honestly, that little devil Potter is completely out of his depth. All your training's been for nothing. Katie's rivalry with Fleur had always been tinged with annoyance rather than outright malice, unlike the icy standoffs between Hermione and Luna, but her derision cut just the same. She pursed her lips, eyebrows raised, as she watched Harry and his dragon gain on their target. Harry ignored the jibe. His focus was on the rising stone slab ahead, glowing with ancient magic. One more platform to conquer, one more challenge to overcome before the final leap. He tightened his grip and whispered, "Come on, Shufang, let's show them what we've got." The fire dragon reared back and surged forward, its roar echoing across the arena as Harry prepared to claim victory. The stands fell quiet as Fleur Delacour cut a dazzling figure atop her fire dragon construct. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Surely she'd be the one to slip, to misjudge a turn and topple off. Yet everyone knew this contest depended less on raw spellcasting and more on code-breaking, drafting precise instructions, spatial awareness, and a blend of boldness and caution. After all, no one expected competitors to intuitively unlock the dragon's hidden mechanisms. It was entirely ordinary that the other riders lagged behind Fleur. None of them had sampled the competition's special phoenix draught to sharpen their reflexes. Blame it on their lack of potion, or perhaps on the simple fact that they were men, the spectators mused. Ryan, the color commentator, gave a nonchalant shrug. Irva's has just slipped past Harry. He's moved up into second place, though Harry isn't far behind. Oh, look at this. Crumb got a little too eager, clipped the boundary line, and he's off. There was a note of triumph in Arthur Weasley's voice, an odd sense of glee at Victor Krumm's misstep. But most in the arena were entranced by the magic unfolding before them. No one expected the faintly glowing field markers to solidify, becoming a razor-sharp wall of iridescent light. On the enormous projection screens, Victor Krumm's sector of the track wavered as if caught in a heat haze, then went blurry altogether. The sudden shift left everyone holding their breath, wondering what would happen next. The arena's giant screens flickered with a blur of motion so rapid it sent a collective shudder through the crowd, like plummeting from a great height. Then came the crack of snapping branches, and Krumm reappeared on the monitors. He lay face down in a tangle of leaves and dirt, arms shielding his head. For a tense moment, everyone feared the worst, until he read and forced himself to his feet. A collective gasp swept through the stands when observers realized Krumm's face, the only part of him not protected by his uniform, was completely unscathed. By the marks on the nearby trees, it was clear he'd smashed through at least one sturdy branch, but the enchanted armor had held firm. Krumm paused, drawing in a ragged breath, then spoke a single word. Instantly, the Hebridean black stirred. Its huge bat-like wings unfurled, and its great violet eyes fixed on its rider. With a powerful surge, the dragon lifted Krumm off the forest floor. 3 minutes later, the pair re-emerged onto the narrow, winding track. The crowd exploded into cheers. Nobody had expected such a dramatic comeback, and few could deny that Krumm's fall and fiery return were far more thrilling than any of his rivals' performances. Both Irvis and Harry were already closing in on the last stone platform, while Krumm, having just rejoined the course, was only yards away from the penultimate pillar. Meanwhile, Fleur Delacour, Beauxbaton's lone female champion, had not only conquered every obstacle, but also become the first to free her 2 hostages. At the commentator's announcement, the remaining competitors glanced skyward and saw Fleur cradling the rescued children. The 8-year-old girl, who'd once perched on the far right pillar, now buried her face in Fleur's robes, trembling with relief. Beside her, the older girl, beautiful with large oval eyes, stooped her head shyly, like a puppy seeking comfort, and rubbed her cheek against Fleur's hand. With the hostages safe, Irvis and Harry burst onto the final sweep of track. No stone platforms, just a serpentine sprint to the finish. "Look at that speed," crackled the announcer. Irvis's Peruvian viper tooth has flared its eyes. He and Harry's fire dragon are a blurred streak of brass and scarlet. Irvis edges ahead. Could second place slip his way for Castrubsche? But success proved fleeting. Harry's dragon, still under the lingering spell of the Vila dancers on the sidelines, faltered in mid-stride. Before Irvis's viper tooth could veer clear, both dragons collided in a tangle of wings and scales, and tumbled together onto the winding track, leaving the rest of the field wide open. Neville's voice crackled in Ron's ear, and Ron frowned. But Elvis can see the future, he protested. Why did he still order the venom-toothed dragon to open its eyes? And why didn't he slow it down with a spell? Neville shook his head in mild disbelief. You didn't know, he said. Elvis's vision only reaches 7 seconds ahead. In that snapshot of time, the venom tooth was never charmed, so he boldly asked it to open its eyes. As for a slowing spell, just watch the screen. Ron swung around to the bank of monitors. There, high above the track, the massive dragon hung in midair, its wings motionless. It was flying all right, only it had forgotten to flap. Suddenly it clicked. Oh, so it's still in the air. It just isn't flapping its wings. Before Ron could digest this, the venom-toothed dragon, now fully alert, dipped back toward the course under Elvis's calm guidance. On the leaderboard, Harry surged past into first place, and Elvis reclaimed the spot he'd lost, sitting firmly in second, for now. Crumb has just cleared the final stone platform, and now sits in third place, while Harry hurtles toward the finish line. Suddenly, Elvis issues another command. The venomous fang dragon's eyes snap open, and with a thunderous roar, it surges into a full sprint. Students who'd assumed Harry's lead was unassailable turn their attention from the scoreboard to the 2 figures streaking across the sky toward the platform where the hostages are bound. Harry races in the lead, his eyes glowing a feral yellow, and close behind him, the bronze-spiked Hungarian horntail beats its massive wings with earth-shaking force. The venomous fang dragon fights to keep its swirling vision focused, but Irvas drives it on with grim determination. The arena comes to a hush as the 2 dragons close in on that final platform. Then, at the very moment the venomous fang seems poised to overtake the horntail, Harry springs upward. Arms outstretched, he unveils black, membranous wings that unfurl at his arms and waist. In that instant, he becomes a true fire drake in human form, gliding through the air with effortless, breathtaking grace. Harry and Elvis hurtled toward the stone platform, the crazed, venomous fang dragon snapping at their heels. This time, though, Irvis refused to wait for death. He sprang to his feet, matched Harry's pace, and launched himself, and Harry followed suit, straight onto the platform. The stands went silent. Every spectator's heart pounded in their chest. With one thunderous crash, both boys landed hard on the stone. The roar that instantly filled the arena rivaled any dragon's roar. Incredible! Simply incredible! Harry and Elvis have both made it onto the platform with astonishing athleticism. Harry even soared above it. But of course, only one can claim the victory. At that exact moment, a golden snitch darted down and settled on Mr. Weasley's ear. He gave it a gentle tap, and the enchanted messenger crackled to life. By order of the tournament officials, we hereby award second place in this task to Harry Potter of Hogwarts. Back home, on Privet Drive, life went on oddly. The house next door was suddenly sealed off by the ministry, and inspectors arrived every morning. There was no chance of sleeping in anymore. Chapter 234, Dumbledore, Familiar Yet Strange. The Velas froze mid-step. It wasn't because the challenge had ended. Rather, the judges had already determined second and third places, and Victor Crumb was all but assured of last. The officials on the dais bowed their heads and exchanged hushed words before giving the signal. A golden snitch darted overhead, and at its silent command, a thick fog rolled back over the stone platforms. The music cut off, and the Velas vanished as if swallowed by the mist. Harry and Irvis sprang toward the stone pillars to free the captives. Bound by enchanted iron chains, the hostages had seemed impossible to rescue, but the moment the wizards touched their wands to the shackles, the metal disintegrated into ash. Ginny, who had been slumped against one pillar, and the girl from Castrobushy beside her stirred awake, blinking in confusion. A roar of relief and excitement swept through the stands. Even the referees, perched on their little cloud seats, leaned forward to whisper heatedly about the new turn of events. Below them, the fire dragons ascended into the open arena, their wings stirring sparks as they prepared for the next stage of the contest. Harry carried Ginny in his arms as they made their way down the floating marble stairs that spiraled beneath the stadium. Yet even as he focused on every careful step, he couldn't shake the strange look on Professor Dumbledore's face. Normally, those piercing blue eyes were alive with curiosity and warmth. Now they seemed empty, shadowed by some private thought. Harry realized with a jolt that this had nothing to do with the match's result. Dumbledore was pondering something far more personal. When Dumbledore finally caught Harry's gaze, his expression shifted again. There was an almost clinical scrutiny there, tempered by a flicker of unsettling pleasure, as if Harry had become an unexpected puzzle the headmaster was eager to solve. For a moment, the doctor's eyes looked like those of a stranger. "Harry, are you all right?" Ginny pressed, her small hand landing lightly on his chest. "You've been staring. Don't tell me your neck's seized up from hanging over the edge that long." Harry blinked and shook his head. "I'm fine," he lied, brushing off his daze. He'd only just realized how long he'd been watching Dumbledore instead of watching his step. At that instant, Victor Krum swooped down the stairs behind them, carefully lowering a Slytherin girl to the platform below, a courteous rescue that drew applause from the stands. Ginny peered up at Harry, arching an eyebrow. "Really?" she asked softly, her voice full of teasing doubt. Harry managed a grin, just in time to keep his footing as they reached the bottom. Here's a polished, idiomatic rewrite of the scene. I've kept all the key characters, actions, and bits of dialogue, but smoothed the grammar and flow for an English-speaking audience. For the entire time she'd been staring at Harry, he hadn't once looked at her neck. Yet she found herself swallowing his feeble excuse and, almost subconsciously, dropped the subject. Instead, she jumped to her next question. "Harry, are you number 2? Her voice held an excited edge, as though he just won the whole contest. Given Hibiscus's identity, Ginny had already crowned her champion, so in Ginny's mind, second place was practically first. Harry opened his mouth to answer, but before he could say a word, something caught his eye. The tall Durmstrang student who'd gone before him trotted over to where Headmaster Karkaroff stood. He bent to whisper in Karkaroff's ear, and a flicker of surprise passed over the older wizard's lined, tentacled face. That was his cue. Dumbledore's voice rang out across the courtyard. "I believe you'll no longer refuse my assistance, Igor." With a graceful leap, Dumbledore dropped from his white cloud and drifted down into the gathered throng like a great snowy bird. He drew his wand and pointed it at the bundle of meat swaddled in a fur cloak. "Shall we proceed?" Harry blinked. What did he just say? Ginny frowned. "When did Dumbledore and Grindelwald start talking?" He shrugged. "Beats me. Maybe it happened while you were competing. You didn't notice?" Ginny's eyes went wide, as if she'd just uncovered a new continent. "Hold on. Karkaroff? What in Merlin's name happened to him? Why is he nothing but a bloody mess? And why has Dumbledore suddenly swooped in to save him? You said they even consulted Grindelwald's opinion." Harry ran a hand through his hair, still shuddering at the memory. "He's completely unhinged. He actually had the nerve to mock Fleur's pureblood heritage. Ryan was here. I don't know if you saw it, but Karkaroff's skull was practically ground to mush right in front of us. It nearly splattered all over Krum's shoes. And yet, he didn't die. His wounds just healed themselves, piece by piece. I'm convinced Ryan had something to do with it." Ginny sank onto a sofa, her expression a mix of relief and exasperation. "Ryan's temper is usually legendary. I'm surprised he didn't." "Exactly," Harry cut in. But instead of breaking the curse, Snape declared it too valuable to lift. He begged Dumbledore to leave it intact for study. Karkaroff himself insisted on it, claimed he wanted to use it as a research specimen for his master. All the while, Dumbledore was writing to Grindelwald behind the scenes. Just a letter, apparently. No one knows the details. Ginny let out a slow breath. "No, so Karkaroff's still alive, and here I thought the day would finally be dull." She shook her head in disbelief. "Only at Hogwarts, honestly." Harry leaned back, exasperated but oddly relieved. "Only at Hogwarts." She stood with her wand raised, weaving layer upon layer of invisible curses into dense black smoke. Dumbledore worked steadily beside her, dispelling each one as it formed. With a soft sigh, he paused and said, "It looks like this is going to take a while." Harry frowned, watching Dumbledore's deliberate movements. "Something isn't right," he muttered. "He's too light-hearted about it. It feels as if he's cataloging the curses in his mind, not banishing them." Ginny glanced back over her shoulder. "Maybe Grindelwald asked him to recover the original curse patterns," she suggested. "Look at Snape. He hasn't taken his eyes off Karkaroff for a single second." Before them, Victor Karkaroff's shape was slowly solidifying. At first, only two thick, bristly legs poked out from beneath a shabby leather coat. Now the coat had slipped away, revealing a gleaming white fur over his chest, just enough to preserve decency, but nothing more. As his face reformed, smoothing out the wounds and distortions, Harry's expression darkened. "Impossible," he said. "Look at him. His features are restoring themselves. Dumbledore isn't simply removing these curses. He's rewriting Karkaroff's very nature." He glanced at the headmaster with renewed wariness. "Albus seems gentle, but he loves to toy with magic. If he'd wanted to punish Karkaroff for his betrayals and cruelty, he'd have left subtle hexes behind. Instead, he's made him new. Karkaroff now isn't the same man who walked in here." Harry frowned, recalling that fleeting glimpse. "He looked just like Grindelwald," he whispered. "But ever since, he hasn't been seen at Hogwarts, apparently because he's pregnant." Ginny's jaw dropped. "Pregnant? Are you serious? Under those circumstances, how could he have taken Polyjuice Potion and shown up in front of everyone? And why on earth would Dumbledore agree to it?" Harry shook his head. "No, it wasn't Polyjuice. Dumbledore does have odd tastes, but the magical signature was all wrong. If it had been Polyjuice Potion, I wouldn't have sensed anything amiss. It's virtually perfect. Both the magic and the appearance merge seamlessly with the donor's tissue. Even those who can perceive the very essence of magic can't detect flaws. The only thing that gives it away is the subject's mannerisms and habits." Across the courtyard, Karkaroff had finally reverted to his true form. Yet throughout the transformation, he had treated Dumbledore with an astonishing reverence, far more than he ever showed his supposed mistress. It wasn't simply respect, it was as if he were in the presence of Grindelwald himself. And that, Harry realized, made him question everything he thought he knew. "Mist is materializing," Karkaroff barked, flicking his wand. A billow of white fog poured forth, filling the arena with swirling vapor. From within the cloud came the soft rustle of fabric, as though someone were pulling on garments. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the mist evaporated, revealing Karkaroff himself, standing unscathed and composed in the very center of the arena, just as he had at the duel's outset. Chapter 235. The second project is complete. "Potter's sharp as ever," Kate exclaimed, her silver eyes gleaming. He caught the discrepancy immediately. In her vision, the figure who should have been Dumbledore wavered and was replaced by the silhouette of a short-haired woman, her belly unmistakably swollen with child. Kate nudged Ryan's sculpted abs with her elbow, a playful grin on her lips. "Honestly, that pregnancy potion you concocted is brilliant. The subject actually turns into a woman, and then, after giving birth, reverts to their original form. What's the secret behind it?" Penelope's eyes lit up at once. "Don't hold out on us. I've already read the follow-up papers in Advanced Potion Theory. It's more accurate to call it a transgender fertility potion. As the name suggests, it bypasses normal gender restrictions to guarantee fertility, no matter who the drinker is. Men or women, it doesn't matter, and you don't even need two wizarding donors' genetic material to brew it. One of us must supply pure genetic material, the other fresh, living tissue, blood, hair, or the like. The downside? Every time we swap in hair or other body matter instead of raw DNA, the potion grows more demanding. It needs extra mandrake juice and phoenix feathers. Still, if I gave my hair and you provided your genetic sample, we'd have everything we need for a fertility elixir." A chill ran through Ryan at the thought of pregnancy. His mind raced back over everything they'd said. "Wait," he blurted. "There's a rule I almost forgot. A single fertility potion only recognizes the DNA of two wizards, and only those two. Even if one of them is represented by, say, a hair follicle instead of a vial of genetic extract, the rule stands. It won't work for anyone else." He paused, swallowing hard. "I only have one set of wizard DNA in mind. So if this is about me getting pregnant, you, of the two of you, are the more suitable donor." The pair exchanged glances. "Ah. Is that true?" Ryan seized the moment. "But if neither of you is comfortable with that arrangement, I have another idea. Before Lily Evans was buried, Severus Snape smuggled out a single strand of her hair. He magically and alchemically preserved it, kept it alive, really, and legend has it she'll return to us at Easter." He watched as the two wizards absorbed this new possibility. With Lily's active hair strand as a stand-in for her DNA, they could still honor the two-wizard requirement while keeping everyone's personal boundaries intact and ensure Ryan's potion would flourish come springtime. Why don't we let our poor potions professor get up to mischief with Harry's mum and see if they can produce a love child before the Triwizard even starts? One girl teased with a wicked grin. You little imp, Kate snapped, though the flush in her cheeks and the sparkle in her eyes betrayed how much she enjoyed the idea. You know that's exactly the kind of trouble I live for. When does the first task begin? Penelope leaned forward, curiosity dancing in her voice. It has to be before Easter, right? I can't wait to watch. Have the officials announced the scores yet? Ryan shrugged and unfolded a parchment. Ladies and gentlemen, we've finally reached our verdict. Taking into account each champion's overall performance, we've assigned a score out of 50 for every competitor. Here's how they did. From their vantage point in the stands, Ginny scowled. No itemized breakdowns this time, she muttered. I'm betting Karkaroff's worried about another scandal. Remember what happened last year with his scores? Down on the field, commentator Arthur Weiss cleared his throat and addressed the roaring crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, Fleur Delacour was the first to free the hostages, finishing her task a full 14 minutes ahead of the hour deadline. She masterfully countered the Vila charm affecting the fire dragon, and her skill in dismantling the magical trap was truly exceptional. A hush fell over the audience as everyone absorbed the news, and even the banter in the stands quieted in anticipation of the next announcement. The Triwizard tournament was underway, and already the competition was proving fiercer than anyone had dared to hope. Therefore, we award her 45 points. Professor McGonagall's voice carried across the arena. A cheer went up from the stands, though a few voices hissed at the missing 5 points. Zacharias, only just disentangling himself from Dudley's cramped lap, sprang to his feet, fuming. It must be those two judges, Karkaroff and Kastrupsha. My champion deserved full marks. Grumbles of agreement rippled through parts of the crowd, but with individual judge scores kept secret this year, the protest died on the spot. McGonagall cleared her throat and announced the next result. Elvas of Hufflepuff demonstrated superb deceleration charms, unshakable composure, and impeccable timing, rescuing the hostages 5 minutes before the deadline. However, 2 falls from the dragon's back cost him time, and he finished third among the 4 champions. We award him 35 points. A deafening roar erupted from the Kastrupsha section as their students leapt to their feet. The girl who'd been the hostage sprinted forward and threw her arms around Elvis, planting a grateful kiss on his cheek. Harry raised an eyebrow. If Elvis's official time was 55 minutes, Harry estimated it at about 54, maybe even 54 and a fraction. McGonagall turned to face the final competitor. Victor Krum performed with his usual steadiness. His blasting spells were precise and powerful, but he returned long after the 1-hour mark. Despite tumbling off the dragon's back once, he refused to quit and finished the entire course, so we awarded him 25 points. Krum waved a hand dismissively at Karkaroff's startled look, then tightened his grip around the Slytherin girl at his side. Next up, Harry Potter. He was the first to break through the magic trap, bold yet cautious, and he led the others on. He was also one of only 2 competitors who never fell from his dragon, and the only one to dispel the dragon doll's enchantment. Those twin dragon eyes lighting up the arena were a sight to behold. And in the final flourish, he partially transfigured into a dragon, briefly soaring above us all. That gambit vaulted him past Elvas into second place. Most of us judges, said Arthur Weasley, shooting Karkaroff a reproachful glance, agree Harry's performance deserves an extra point, but even without it, his total is 40. A cheer rose from the stands. Ginny's face lit up with pride as everyone around her began applauding furiously. 40 points, Harry. You're only 5 points from first place. That's incredible. Beside him, the massive Hungarian horntail reared its spiny head and blasted a 50-foot jet of flame into the sky. The dragon's thunderous roar sounded almost celebratory when word spread that Harry had secured second place in the challenge. Draco Malfoy, sitting in the stands, watched the fearsome beast with a mix of wonder and envy. Could the dragon really be congratulating Harry? Or is it that strange charm he placed in his dragon doll? Draco muttered under his breath. I have to find out as soon as this is over. Meanwhile, the official scoreboard was updated to reflect the combined results of the first two tasks. Fleur Delacour, 92 points. Harry Potter, 84 points. Albus Hufflepuff, 70 points. Victor Krum, 64 points. Arthur Weasley stepped forward to announce the next dates. The third and final individual task will take place on the evening of June 24th. Before that, on the afternoon of June 23rd, we'll hold the team trial, a potion-making contest to determine the strongest house. He paused, smiling at the gathered competitors. You'll all receive the full project details exactly 1 month in advance. Good luck to everyone. Thanks for supporting the Warriors. Nice move. What's so great about that? Just glad the game's finally over. Harry tousled Ginny's fiery hair with a grin. Thankfully, the match didn't overlap with Easter. Most PE looked forward to a 2-week break, but the summer term was already underway. For Harry, though, April 3rd carried a far more personal deadline, the day he would return to Gunter's old manor and bring his mother back to life. Chapter 236, Good Luck. An amber glow swept across the sky, turning sunset into something surreal and dreamlike. As Mr. Weasley's voice rang out to announce the end of the Triwizard Tournament, the floating stone platforms that had formed the course began their slow ascent, drifting away through the low, pearly clouds until they vanished from sight. The patch of earth that had held the rescued hostages likewise shimmered and snapped back to its original place. From the edge of the forbidden forest came a single, sharp whistle. Moments later, the mighty fire-breathing dragons, each already greeting its champion rider, beat their enormous wings and soared back into the shadowy trees. Even the spiral staircase that had materialized behind the spectator stands dissolved into thin air, leaving nothing but empty space where it had hung. Harry found himself half disappointed. He'd been curious about that staircase, how it curved through the clouds and delivered viewers up to the lofty platforms. Ginny, too, wasn't happy. That's not fair, she grumbled. I blinked, and suddenly the tournament was over. I never even saw myself up there as a hostage, or got to try out that ladder. Harry shrugged, still gazing at the spot where the staircase had been. Then, as if in answer, the entire Quidditch pitch began to shift. It glided past the greenhouses and arched stone bridge, skimmed over the surface of the Black Lake, and finally returned to its rightful place in front of the castle. With a gentle settling motion, it came to rest on solid ground once more. Everything looked as it had before, yet somehow, after today's trials, nothing would ever be quite the same. Harry and the others drifted back toward the castle with the rest of the crowd, their footsteps echoing softly on the cobblestones. The whole scene felt strangely anticlimactic, more like the end of an ordinary Quidditch match than something grander. The only real difference was the sheer number of spectators. When they reached the Black Lake, Draco, Ron, and Neville hurried to meet them at the water's edge. Harry, Draco blurted out the moment they drew near, his eyes flicking to Harry's unusually striking gaze. Is what Ron said true? Is that spell only an illusion? Harry nodded. No trickery or glamour. The changes in my eyes and everything else are very real. Draco looked skeptical, so Harry went on. Ryan explained it to me. He said it's because I've formed a contract with the Pluto dragon, the one most closely tied to the ancient dragons. That bond grants me this extraordinary magic. Draco blinked. I see. Neville exchanged a surprised glance with Ginny, and even Ron looked taken aback. Draco opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he asked, When did Ryan tell you this? We said goodbye after lunch at Hagrid's, and then you vanished until the match began. Harry met Draco's curious gaze. He knew how strange the afternoon must have seemed, his sudden disappearance, the bizarre power on display. Yet Ginny, Neville, and Ron regarded him without a shred of doubt. Draco may have understood that Ryan was powerful, but nothing had prepared him for this. He managed a casual shrug. After all, Harry's friendship with Ryan had always been unconventional. Harry had plunged deeper into the magical world than anyone expected, and if he said something was real, it almost certainly was. He couldn't help but grin with curiosity as he turned to Draco. Do you think Ryan still knows about the Pluto dragon? Draco shrugged. Of course he does. I've peppered him with questions about magic, more than I've ever asked Dumbledore. Harry nodded absently, then scanned the grounds. All right, Draco. I've got something here that will definitely give you a good scare. Want to see it? Draco laughed. You're joking. I'm made of sterner stuff than that. Oh, you're brave enough, Harry said, but this is special. Come on. He led Draco toward a quiet corner beside the Forbidden Forest. Ginny, Neville, and Ron looked on, curious, but they were mid-snack and gave Harry's little expedie tie-in a wide berth. No one dared interrupt. As they walked, Draco glanced nervously at the tree line. Is it a fire-breathing dragon? Better than a fire dragon, Harry teased. Draco's eyes widened. The Pluto dragon? Harry only smiled mysteriously. You'll see soon enough. They paused behind a tangled thicket at the forest's edge. Ron, unable to contain himself, called softly, What is it? Seriously, what are you hiding? Harry held up a finger. Shh, just a little longer. He gestured toward the shadows, his expression alight with anticipation. Ready? Harry shrugged out of his black uniform, revealing his Hogwarts robe beneath. Then he wheeled around to face them, legs braced, fists clenched, eyes squeezed shut. Cuchilla, he intoned, though no ordinary words followed, only a low, resonant growl. His entire body convulsed, sweat beading and sliding down his skin. In moments, glossy black scales erupted across his arms, chest, and face. At the same time, jagged spines punched through the muscles along his back, stretching and sharpening as they emerged. A long, sinuous tail, nearly 7 feet in length, as dark and unyielding as forged steel, rolled out behind him. With a single thunderous snap, 2 vast wings unfurled from his shoulder blades, each membrane jet black and studded with bronze-tipped spikes. His fingers elongated into hooked claws, and when he blinked open his eyes, they glowed with golden, vertical pupils. The entire metamorphosis took less than a heartbeat. Draco, Pansy, and the others could only stare in stunned silence. Before them stood not just Harry Potter, but a smaller replica of a dragon, scales, spikes, wings, and all. No one dared move or breathe. They half expected him to inhale sharply and unleash a 50-foot gout of flame at any moment. Harry hovered above them, wings unfurled in a majestic arc. His voice, now richer and deeper, like the distant rumble of a dragon's roar mingled with his own, cut through the hushed air. I can even fly now, he said evenly. No one needed to hear the words to know he wasn't joking. Beneath him, dark, leathery wings beat in broad, effortless strokes. Sharp spines ran down each wing's leading edge, catching the late afternoon light as Harry lifted himself higher. With a deft motion, he spun a full 360 degrees in midair, then hovered, wings spread proudly, a testament to his newfound power. Ginny's eyes widened, and a tremor crept into her voice as she called up, Harry, can you change back? Already she was picturing protective wards, just in case those spikes proved more than ornamental during more personal moments. She forced her knuckles white around her wand as she fought both worry and exhilaration. Below her, the air buzzed with excited chatter. Draco Malfoy's usual cool composure crumbled in fascination. Is this really just the spell's doing? He asked, leaning forward. If I tried something similar? Neville Longbottom cut in, practically bouncing on his toes. Think how much stronger you'd be. Imagine dueling with those wings. Your reach would be incredible. At the edge of the circle, Ron Weasley scratched his head, a grin spreading across his face. He pointed under Harry's arms, where the wings met his torso. Hang on, weren't your wings supposed to be there, in the competition? Did they move? Harry laughed, the sound resonant and warm. He folded his wings in toward his back and drifted down, landing lightly on the grass. The ground seemed to tremble slightly under his weight, as if acknowledging the shift in power. Draco exchanged a look with Neville and Ron, each boy's mind whirling with possibilities. Ginny stepped forward, her earlier trepidation replaced by a fierce curiosity. Harry, she said gently, what does all this mean for you, for us? He met her gaze, the peculiar glow in his eyes softening. I honestly don't know yet, he admitted, but I want to understand it, and to make sure this power doesn't hurt anyone. Especially you, Ginny. A hush fell over the group, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what Harry would do next. Above them, the last light of day touched his wings with a golden edge, and in that moment, every one of them understood that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Why did they shift positions again? Ron blurted out, his eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of exasperation. Ginny's voice trembled between relief and worry. Harry, are you all right? Harry scowled, folded his ragged wings against his back, and drifted to a gentle landing in the courtyard. In an instant, the scales faded, the wings and tail retracted, and his reptilian eyes snapped back to their familiar green. All that remained of the beastly transformation were the gashes and shredded cloth of his once pristine robe. "Back to normal," Harry murmured, tracing a finger along a tear in his sleeve. As if undoing a spell, the fabric wove itself whole again, the rips vanishing in a soft shimmer. Ginny practically tackled him. "Oh, thank Merlin, you can change back!" She clung to him for a heartbeat longer than courtesy allowed, then released him with a relieved laugh. Ron, who'd been fidgeting impatiently, edged forward. "But why did the wings grow on your back this time? You said before they appeared elsewhere." Harry sighed and rolled his eyes, but seeing Ron hold his tongue until Ginny calmed down, he swallowed his annoyance. "Fine. Call it dragonization, a side effect of my magic mixing with the dragon blood in me. The placement varies. It's unpredictable." He spread his arms in frustration. "Sometimes I sprout wings from my shoulders, sometimes from my hips. I've got no control over where they'll pop up next." Ginny reached out to steady his arm. "Still, you're safe, and you're back. That's what matters." Harry gave her a wry smile. "Yeah, but next time I wouldn't be upset if they just stayed hidden permanently." He straightened his robes, fully intact now, and joined his friends as they headed back inside, each step lighter than the last. "As a Norwegian Ridgeback dragon, I can reshape my very form at will. For example, I could sprout eyes on the soles of my feet, and if needed, even replicate them temporarily through magic." Chapter 710, Threat to the World, Harry Potter. "Then why don't you grow wings during the competition? How cool would that be?" Ron said, eyes shining with excitement. He pictured himself aloft on mighty dragon wings, roaring triumphantly as the crowd cheered. Draco and Neville exchanged puzzled glances. Only Ginny looked genuinely curious. "Grow wings? Why would that happen?" Harry grinned. "You didn't notice what I did right before I transformed into a dragon during the first task?" "Ah, did you wear some special gear?" Ginny guessed. "Exactly," Harry said. "It was a reinforced suit, enchanted with protection runes. It can survive a fall from hundreds of feet and keep whoever's inside perfectly safe. Because it covered almost my entire body, nothing, no wings, no tail, could burst through it. Only exposed parts, like the head, could change shape unless you remove the armor." Ron's jaw dropped. "So that's why I didn't see any wings." Draco rubbed his chin. "Can you show us again? That spell you used to share a dragon's vision, it was brilliant." Harry considered, then nodded. "All right, the charm I used is actually a variant of an old human dragon ocular link. It was originally designed to let dragon handlers see through their mount's eyes. I adapted it so that, when I transfigured into a dragon, I could project its vision back to my friends. Only," he paused, "it doesn't last long, and I doubt it will hold if the third task isn't about that fire dragon again." Neville frowned. "Wait, so this link only works when you're specifically tied to a Norwegian Ridgeback?" "No," Harry clarified. "The original ritual works for any dragon. The Ridgeback just triggered my transformation in the first task. But the charm itself drains your magic fast, and it fades within minutes unless you constantly refresh it. I'm not sure I can maintain it under the pressure of the third task." Ron looked crestfallen. Ginny laid a hand on his shoulder. "We'll manage without spying through dragon eyes. We've got your back, Harry." Draco gave a curt nod. "Then we prepare the old-fashioned way." Harry smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of friendship and resolve. Whatever lay ahead in the third task, they would face it together. Neville frowned. "Wait, hold on, Harry." Before Harry could respond, Ron waved him off. "Guys, you're forgetting that Harry's bonded with a Hades dragon. He can tap into its power directly. That would be far more impressive and potent than anything else." Harry looked from Ron to Neville and back again. "Actually, Ron's onto something, but not quite the way you think. My recent change doesn't have to rely on the fire dragon at all. My body and magic recorded the process of transformation, so even without Lyle's aid, I can trigger it on my own." An empty classroom on Hogwarts' third floor was so silent it might have been sealed forever, except for the soft murmur of Albus Dumbledore before a full-length mirror. The silvered glass reflected only himself, but he spoke as though answering another voice. "You're certain it's impossible," he whispered. and yet I feel you there, urging me onward. There were no visible runes etched around the frame, no faint hum of enchantment in the air. A skilled alchemist would find no trace of magic or transmutation in the mirror's surface. To anyone watching, the headmaster would appear lost in solitary conversation, schizophrenic even. But Dumbledore alone knew the truth. He was neither delusional nor mad. Not yet, at least. Any seasoned practitioner of high magic or advanced alchemy would have declared him mad to see this. He alone recognized the truth in that ordinary looking-glass. The reflection was at once familiar and utterly strange. Gone were the stern planes of his face, softened now into gentle curves, and the taut muscles he'd once boasted, the 8-pack abs he'd so recently flexed in the office, had given way to a rounded, unmistakably pregnant belly. But this physical transformation was only the tip of a far stranger miracle, an otherworldly communion with Gellert, Grindelwald. No known spell or potion could account for it. Instead, their bond sprang from a heart-deep covenant forged in the summer of 1899, an alliance that, by every right, should have been destroyed when they formally severed ties in 1945. They called it the Blood Alliance. Born in blood and sustained by devotion, this pact was sealed in 2 small silver vials and anchored by a single unbreakable vow, never to harm or betray one another. Fueled by love, pride, and a touch of innocent arrogance, it was both their greatest gift and their deadliest poison, an irreversible contract binding their fates together across time. Chapter 7. The Unraveled Pact. When the crystalline vial of their blood alliance shattered at last, something inside them shifted. In that instant, each felt the other's heartbeat as if it were their own. And when he leaned close and murmured, "Who else will love you now, Dumbledore?" A new bond sparked between them, so unsettling that it made him queasy, and yet beneath the queasiness lay a thrill he could not deny. He discovered, with a mixture of dread and fascination, that he could tune in to Dumbledore's thoughts and emotions whenever he wished. For 40 years they'd circled one another like captive animals, proud, stubborn, implacable, and never once admitted how deeply they were bound. Yet the promise of new life now growing in Dumbledore's womb forced both of them to confront the truth head-on. That night, restless and feverish, he woke from a dream convinced he heard the gentle stirrings of an unborn child. A life so fragile it seemed wrapped in dew and dawn light. By morning, every nerve in his body buzzed with the revelation that he could no longer deny. The bond was real and dangerously intimate. On the dueling stage today, he let go of his last defenses. He felt Dumbledore before his opponent even raised a wand. After the final spell fizzled into a wisp of coppery air, they slipped away from the crowd to speak, finally, at long last. Dumbledore's voice drifted to him through the link, low and shivering with emotion. "Something new is happening to the boy you love." He flinched. "Stay away from Harry. You have to understand why I let this connection exist." "Let it exist?" Dumbledore's laughter was wry, half mournful. It sprang from love, from 2 souls who never wished to harm each other. Even that infamous duel, remember, we attacked out of fear, but it was the same desperate bond driving us. The blood pact never truly severed. "No," he growled, recalling the heat of their standoff all those years ago. "Back then I meant to kill you." A sigh rippled through their link. "Yet you could not bear solitary life." He hesitated, guilt twisting in his chest. "Only because you possess the Elder Wand." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken regrets and reluctant longing. Outside, the wind rattled the shattered remnants of that once powerful vial, as if mocking the folly of fearing what they had become. Bound by blood, by magic, and now by something deeper than either had expected, they stood at the edge of a new and terrifying truth. Love, once denied, will find a way to break every chain. "You speak of ideals as if they matter," the stranger said, voice low. "But your vision is too radical, far too dangerous for our world." The man before him, wand clenched, cloak swirling, snapped back. "Then why doesn't the Elder Wand answer to my magic? Why won't it obey? Because I failed inside myself. In the vast scope of everything, my grand ideals amount to nothing. Maybe you matter more than they do. In that duel, you never even raised a shield. Were you begging me to kill you so I'd finally give up?" Albus Dumbledore reached out and stroked the mirror's smooth surface. His eyes, at first gentle, turned steel hard. I know you won't, he said softly. But Harry is different. He matters more than you or I. The other's lips curled in contempt. He is dangerous. I have never seen such a flawless wizard. Through your eyes, I perceive the threat he poses to our world. His magic is at once divine and wicked, chaotic yet perfectly ordered. The phoenix's gift in him makes him supremely adaptable. Like a wand plumed with phoenix feather, he masters every spell imaginable. The dragon's blood that courses through his veins fills him with ancient ferocity. Ordinary curses are mere breezes to him. And the most terrifying thing? All this power doesn't clash within him. It weaves into an ever-growing harmony with each breath he takes. Spare me your talk of his kindness. Beneath that gentle exterior lies a dark, chaotic force. He leaned forward, voice low. My intuition tells me that if he truly wanted to, he could become a far more dangerous dark wizard than that juggler you once mentioned. She frowned. But you can't deny he has a pure, kind soul. His magic is genuinely holy. He sighed. And yet you admitted it's that pretty boy's presence that grants him eternal life. When you and I finally leave this world, who can guarantee he won't deteriorate with time? This is the world our children will inherit. Which matters more, him or our child? She looked away, silence stretching between them. You don't have to go, he added softly. You've memorized Karkaroff's curse model. If you choose, you could use it to become immortal. With you by my side, I believe our world would stay safe. She turned back, pain shadowing her eyes. And you? What about you? He closed his eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. I should have died long ago, back in the summer of 1899. Her breath caught. Then why should I live in a world without you? The words barely left her lips before his figure shimmered and vanished. The connection fell silent, just as it had for the past 40 years. Chapter 238, Blessing. Late afternoon light filtered through the arched windows of the Ravenclaw common room, where a handful of students lounged by the crackling fireplace. Kate glanced at Ryan, whose eyebrows shot upward, betraying a sudden tension. What's the matter, Ryan? She asked, tilting her head. Are you really going to do that? Have you spoken to Snape? Beside them, Penello's eyes gleamed with excitement. The guardian of my most precious artifact is under threat, she whispered. I can't believe someone would dare target him. Guardian? You mean? Kate launched into the realization. Boy Potter, during the match? Grindelwald? Ryan nodded grimly. All evidence points that way. He apparently intended to eliminate Harry. How on earth did he plan to do it? Penello leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. The more she learned about the First Wizarding War, the more she found herself drawn to Grindelwald's strange magnetism. Not his showy spells or his striking features, but his ideas. To Penello, who had trained under Ryan's watchful eye, those ideas often felt dangerously naive. Yet in the context of a last-century wizarding world poised on the brink of progress, his idealism was something else entirely, the spark of a revolution. If today's increasingly forward-thinking British wizarding community could be imagined as a grand edifice, Grindelwald's doctrines, flawed though they might be, were the keystone. They had been the first cracks in an old foundation, the initial rays of a new dawn. And now, it seemed, those very ideas were colliding with the present, dragging Harry into danger once more. Kate closed her hand into a fist and tapped it against her palm, determination hardening her tone. We can't let this go unchallenged, not when it's Harry's life on the line. They exchanged resolute looks, the firelight dancing in their eyes. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready to stand together, and to protect the boy who had already weathered so much. He opened the wizarding world's eyes to the astonishing advances of Muggles, and quietly planted the seeds for future cooperation. But how would a genius like that go about undermining Professor Lane's life's work? That's a question worth exploring. He intended to dismantle the legend of Harry's perfection, Ryan said, not with force, but through love, by steering Harry's magic toward pure, unyielding goodness. Kate's eyes widened. Are you suggesting Dumbledore? Ryan shook his head. Their methods overlap in some ways, yes, but the heart of their philosophies diverges sharply. Grindelwald had absolute faith in his own vision and very little trust in others. His signature blue flames didn't just burn, they functioned as a trial, revealing the true character of anyone who dared follow him. Dumbledore, by contrast, also craved a measure of control, but he was never afraid to put his trust in people. When it came to Harry, Dumbledore chose faith over coercion. He gave gentle guidance rather than imposing rigid commands, meeting with Harry every Saturday night to sow subtle suggestions. Penello leaned forward. But did Grindelwald actually use magic to manipulate his followers' thoughts? Ryan offered a half-smile. Think of it as a blessing. In magic, curses and blessings are two sides of the same coin. A blessing is simply a kinder kind of curse. Just like the blood curse, its true nature is a divine blessing. But modern witches and wizards, impoverished and frail, cannot withstand its intensity, so they recoil from it as the most vicious hex imaginable. Ryan swept his hand through the air, and a flickering image sprang to life within the fireplace flames. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a Flu Network connection, but Kate and Penello recognized it instantly for what it was, a live feed, magically seared into existence by the Lion Demon from some hidden corner of the world. They saw a venerable, candlelit church, once a place of worship, now crowded with the very kind of robed practitioners who, in the Middle Ages, would have been labeled heretics and mercilessly hunted. Where a carved statue of the deity once presided, there now stood a life-sized calendar, its surface carved out in two niches. In one indentation stood a remarkably muscular Harry, in the other lay a motionless Hungarian horntail. Both figures clutched rolled parchments in their hands. Penello's jaw dropped. "What's written on those scrolls?" he whispered. "And those look exactly like our company's new merchandise line. Could Grindelwald be planning to use them as the conduit for this blessing?" His voice trembled with awe. Ryan's eyes glinted in the hearth's glow. "Those parchments aren't mere paper," he explained. "They've been laced with sugar and exotic spices, ingredients that, when burned or dissolved, heighten the spell's potency. Grindelwald intends to transform our everyday souvenirs into sacred vessels for divine power." They had carefully written every blessing on a single slip of parchment, wishes that Harry be handsome, kind, humble, and understanding, then wove in the raw, untamed energy of the unknown element X. With that foundation laid, the group concentrated on the name Harry Potter, using the photograph pinned to the kitchen calendar as a magical anchor. In doing so, they could send their goodwill and that potent enchantment straight to Harry in the real world. "Wait," Kate said, eyes wide. "So you just mix sugar, spices, some nice sentiments, and a bit of magic, and poof, you've created a blessing. Why sugar and spices?" Ryan smiled. "This ritual dates back to the Middle Ages. Back then, sugar was a luxury so rare that nobles would list barrels of honey in their wills to flaunt their wealth. Spices were just as valuable, used as currency across Western Europe for taxes, rent, even wages and debts. To many people, spices and sugar were worth more than life itself. That's why we use them here. When you pair such precious ingredients with heartfelt wishes and a wizard's focused intent, the magic you produce is extraordinarily powerful." Kate let out a tired sigh. "Grindelwald's mobility is astonishing, and now he's even pregnant. Combine that with his talent for sowing chaos, and he's a force to be reckoned with." Penello glanced at Ryan. "Do you think any of this will affect Potter?" Ryan waved a dismissive hand, snuffing out the flickering flames in front of them. "Not a chance. Grindelwald still underestimates Harry. Even with flawless magic, you can't disrupt the balance that easily." Penello narrowed his eyes. "You sound almost supportive of Grindelwald." Ryan shrugged. "I'm neither here nor there. When two sacred powers intertwine, they can give birth to the most unholy of evils. Whether you let holy and profane energies flow in sequence or merge them outright, the result is equally potent. That lesson came to me through Harry. As for Grindelwald himself, he's proven more than capable." Meanwhile, at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Ron Weasley couldn't contain his excitement. "This is brilliant. Becoming a battle spell soldier is amazing. And look at these robes, they fit perfectly. Will it help us in the next game?" Ron's question cut through the evening air. Harry lurched, pressing his right hand against the rough bark of a towering oak to keep from collapsing. "Ron! Harry!" Ron called again, and Ginny, Draco, Neville, and the others sprinted to his side, forming a protective circle around him. "Are you all right?" Harry blinked against the pounding in his skull. I don't know. I saw a chapel. People were blessing me." A fierce headache thundered behind his eyes, but beneath the pain, a gentle warmth began to spread through his chest. Along with it came strange, vivid images. Stained glass windows aglow with sunlight, soft candlelight flickering across bowed heads, and the distant murmur of prayers. Then a clear, crystalline cry, delicate as fairy music, soared through his mind, unmistakably the song of a phoenix. Almost at once, a second sound followed, a roar so immense it felt as though the earth itself had awakened. It was draconic yet unlike any dragon Harry, or even Hagrid, had ever heard. They had always believed the Pluton dragons to be the oldest and fiercest of their kind. But this voice was older still, an echo of a creature older than any chronicled worm, a force of nature that left no trace in the annals of history. Harry didn't have the knowledge to name it. No scholar had ever recorded such a being. It had appeared in legends only as a cataclysm, a living upheaval. But its power was undeniable. Before he could make sense of it, two distinct whispers echoed inside his head. The comforting warmth drained away, and Harry's vision swam. He tightened his grip on the oak tree as the world tilted, breathing hard against the sudden emptiness within him. Narrative. He couldn't quite call it disappearing. It was more as if his body had become a sponge, drawing in this mysterious surge of water from nowhere. In an instant, he felt both sated and weightless, like shedding a thick, burdensome callus. At the same moment, all the images and heartfelt blessings brimming with positive energy simply dissolved into thin air. Author's note. Dear readers, my online community was unexpectedly sealed off this week, and I've been required to take a daily nucleic acid test. That's why these past two updates have been delayed. Also, Chapter 235 was taken down. I'm currently filing an appeal to have it reinstated. Thank you all for your patience and continued support. Chapter 712, The Magic of the Wind. It had been nearly 2 days since the match ended and the strange affliction struck in the Forbidden Forest. Ever since that night, none of us had felt anything like it again. We had sprinted back to Hogwarts at once and summoned Madame Pomfrey, but her examination revealed nothing amiss. In fact, she declared him healthier than she'd ever seen. As sound as a newborn, she said, marveling at how his vitality seemed almost boundless. Yet, while his condition baffled the school nurse, other oddities were unfolding at Hogwarts. Over the past few potions lessons, Professor Snape, already a master of enigmas, had grown even more inscrutable. He arrived at every class wearing a stark white surgical mask, and his trademark black robes had given way to a heavy, fur-lined coat that looked far too bulky for classroom work. He explained tersely that a mishap in his private research had left him prone to chilling drafts, but he never once set foot in the hospital wing to seek Pomfrey's care. His mood, too, had taken a turn for the worse. Snape's barbs were sharper, his sarcasm more biting. Even Harry Potter, once the object of the potions master's reluctant pride, found himself on the receiving end of curt observations rather than the grudging approval he'd grown used to. And most telling of all, the weekly reports on Snape's latest breakthroughs, usually splashed across the Daily Prophet's education pages, had all but disappeared. Something was at work here, stirring beneath the familiar rhythms of Hogwarts life. Those of us who noticed the change exchanged uneasy glances. The wind was shifting, and with it, the very magic of our world felt poised on the brink of transformation. Harry barely had time to think. After all, it was Saturday. He stood on the chilly Quidditch pitch, wind whipping around him, facing Professor Dumbledore. Today's lesson was about to begin. Harry, Dumbledore said, his voice carrying on the gusts, do you know why we're out here instead of in my office? Harry thought back to their last conversation. You said last week you'd teach me something new, magic connected to wind. Exactly, Dumbledore replied, a playful light in his eyes. He rubbed at the imaginary moisture on his cheeks as if pretending to wipe away tears. Wind is everywhere. In a duel between equals, nimble movements, and the ability to control the air around you can be far more useful than any spell you've learned so far. Now, Harry, draw your wand and aim it at me. Harry hesitated. Don't go easy on me just because I look old, Dumbledore chided with a grin. He flicked his wrist. A silver shimmer spread out, dissolving the cold air in an instant. The biting wind vanished, replaced by the gentle warmth of the Hogwarts greenhouses. Harry squeezed his wand, arm trembling slightly. Expelliarmus! A jet of scarlet light streaked toward Dumbledore, but the headmaster was anything but frail. With a graceful sidestep, he was gone, moving as fluidly as a breeze. The red beam sliced through empty air, leaving Harry standing alone in the soft warmth. Dumbledore's voice came, seemingly from all around. "Well done, Harry. But remember, it's not just about the spells you cast, it's about how you move with the wind itself." Harry took a steadying breath. The real lesson, he realized, was only just beginning. Harry's thoughts about Dumbledore's whereabouts were cut short by a sudden prickling at the back of his neck. Before he could turn, something thick and cool pressed against his spine. The Elder Wand, one of the legendary Deathly Hallows. He gasped, wheeling around. Did you apparate? How did you move so fast?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled behind his spectacles. "Not apparition. That kind of teleportation is poorly suited to a duel. While the magical cost does scale with distance, any jump under 100 feet still demands the same effort. Imagine wasting precious energy on mere positioning, only to face an opponent who's kept all theirs in reserve. You'd be at a severe disadvantage. Age." He paused, lowering the wand from Harry's back. "Now, have you forgotten what today's lesson was?" Harry blinked, suddenly mortified. "Right, wind magic. I just wasn't expecting you." Dumbledore offered a small, knowing smile. Harry looked at the Elder Wand in his hand, its surface gleaming in the dim corridor light. Today was February 26th. In just over a month, he would encounter another Deathly Hallow, the Resurrection Stone, the very artifact said to bring back the dead, even his mother. And if the Elder Wand's surprise visit was any indication, he'd better be ready. Although he'd never have admitted it aloud, Harry still felt the weight of everything he'd experienced in the mirror world. There he had bested the eerie three-eyed Thestral that embodied Voldemort's Resurrection Stone Horcrux, and uncovered every detail of the dark magic trap Voldemort had laid to protect it. Not long afterward, he'd even lived through Voldemort's memories in his dreams. He'd been honing the one skill he believed could undo any magical snare, precise control of magic itself. But in his heart, he wondered, could he truly master it? Dumbledore must have sensed Harry's distraction. Raising a curious-looking wand from beneath his robes, the headmaster caught Harry's gaze. "Take a good look," he said, holding it out. "You'll notice this wand is much thicker than most. I seem to recall Ollivander mentioning that during your fitting." Harry didn't hesitate. "It's Gregorovich's wand," he blurted. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Exactly, Gregorovich's." He slipped the heavy wand back into his sleeve and turned to the chalkboard. "But now, back to today's lesson. The charm I just demonstrated calls upon the wind, the ever-present currents of air." Harry frowned. "Air? So there isn't really any wind involved?" "Good question. And quick thinking?" Moff Dumbledore praised him. "In Muggle science, wind is defined as the movement of air caused by uneven heating from the sun. What we do with magic is bypass the meteorological processes and simply conjure the airflow itself." Harry ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling a touch overwhelmed. "So, do I have to learn all the details of how wind forms naturally too?" Dumbledore smiled gently. "Not in the beginning. You only need to understand the principle, how to shape and direct the air with your will. The finer points of atmospheric physics can come later, if you wish. For now, let us focus on the spell." He had always been behind in mathematics. In elementary school, his modest skills had been more than adequate for basic magical studies, but apparently that wasn't enough here. As that realization sunk in, Professor Belvin cleared his throat. "Don't mistake magic for something illogical," Belvin said kindly. "Magic and science occupy two different spheres. They can intersect, but each follows its own principles. Science isn't just the Muggle facts you've been taught. It's a systematic way of understanding nature's laws. Our alchemy, and many other branches of magic that rely on precise logic, are scientific in their own right." He paused, letting that sink in. Magic itself, by contrast, is far more idealistic. It doesn't conform to real-world physics the way science does. You simply will something to happen, and it happens. Just now, I shifted my form into a rushing breeze. No calculations, no equations, just intent. The student blinked, fascinated. "Is there an official name for that spell?" Belvin chuckled. "Not yet. Technically, it's just a neat application of apparition theory. I collapsed the spatial illusion into moving air and reshaped it. I haven't bothered to name it. nor its dozens of siblings. If I went around christening every little trick, I'd end up as verbose as Arthur, and trust me, you don't want that. Dumbledore tapped the crown of his head. Harry stifled a grin. He could almost see Mr. Weasley's shiny patch every time, then forced himself to focus. So this magic breaks down into 3 steps too? First, you concentrate on where you want to go. Second, you project that. Tee yourself into that space. Let the urge flood every fiber of your being. He paused. That sounds a lot like apparition. Dumbledore shook his head. Not at all. The first step isn't fixating on your destination, but on the wind, the ever-present wind all around us. In the beginning, it's easiest to start somewhere breezy. Harry's eyes flicked toward the empty Quidditch pitch. So that's why you chose here. No one's around, and there's always a breeze off the lake. Exactly, Dumbledore said. Step 2, forget your body. Imagine that wind you just noticed is your true form. Step 3 requires almost no conscious effort. You simply drift until you wake up, as if roused from a dream. You must clear your mind of doubts, let yourself be carried where you will, and only then allow your true self to remember who you are. I'd be happy to help, but I'll need the full chapter text you'd like revised. Could you please paste the entire machine-translated chapter here? Once you do, I'll produce a polished, idiomatic English version. Chapters 13, The Growing Harry, late February in England, still felt frigid. The roads, roofs, lakes, and bridges all wore thick coats of ice, and the stadium grass, once dusted in frost that looked like clouds of white, had only just begun to show through. Yet even with the ice melting, warmth was nowhere in sight. Still, Harry Potter sat cross-legged on the pitch, shirtless, his wand resting across his knees. He looked more like he belonged in the height of summer than in a lingering winter's chill. Beside him stood Albus Dumbledore, perhaps the last person you'd expect to conduct such an unorthodox lesson. If Rita Skeeter ever caught sight of this tableau, she'd sprint back to the Daily Prophet, pen blazing, to spin a 10,000-word scandal piece on the wizarding world's most notorious odd couple. Even after admitting that it was merely magic training, the story would be too sensational to resist. Yet nobody but Harry and Dumbledore knew the truth. This was Harry's own idea. He was mastering the art of wind magic, a discipline that demanded exposure to the elements to heighten one's senses, and thanks to a discreet enchantment, the Quidditch pitch had been warmed just enough to make bare-chested practice bearable. Unfazed by the cold, Harry focused his mind, ready to take the next step in his growing mastery of magic. Harry hadn't removed his robe at first, but the instant he sensed the faint breeze, his attention drifted to the dark, rustling treetops of the Forbidden Forest just beyond the stadium. As he forced his heartbeat to slow, he even caught the soft flutter of the Durmstrang ship's sails across the Black Lake, and, more startlingly, hushed voices drifting from a lone redwood at the water's edge. Professor Dumbledore had already warned him. His sensory perception was extraordinarily sharp, so the smallest sounds and sensations were impossible for him to ignore. It occurred to Harry that shedding his heavy robe might help him feel that breeze more clearly. He hesitated only a moment before slipping it off, draping it over the back of a nearby chair. Dumbledore gave him an encouraging nod. Harry suspected the headmaster had foreseen this move. Otherwise, why prepare the stadium's atmosphere so carefully? Harry, Dumbledore said gently, your mind is still too tense. Harry glanced down, feeling the sudden chill on his skin. He fought down the wave of goosebumps. I'm just cold, he murmured. Then let the cold be a guide, Dumbledore replied. Close your eyes. Imagine that you are the wind itself, a light, drifting breeze that feels every shift in the air. Breathe with it, become part of it. Harry shut his eyes. He pictured himself as a whispering zephyr, flowing through the treetops, skimming the surface of the lake, merging with every ripple of air. Bit by bit, the chill faded from his awareness, replaced by a profound stillness and an openness he had never known before. The leaves are stirred by you. Dumbledore's voice echoed softly in Harry's mind. But what happened next was wholly unexpected. A profound calm swept through Harry's body and soul, relaxing him so completely that he didn't become one with the wind. Instead, he seemed rooted firmly to the earth. He settled into a posture of perfect stillness, much like a Buddhist monk in deep meditation. As the 10 Wheels of the Kshitigarbha Sutra puts it, immovable as the earth, mysterious as a hidden jewel. Behind the thickets at the edge of the forbidden forest, inside a fence of stout logs bound with unicorn hair, the gnarled gray-black bark of a holly tree began to shiver. Dumbledore watched, astonished. There was no swirling breeze or fluttering leaves around Harry, only an invisible magnetic force of magic radiating from him like a silent storm. Harry himself looked as solid and unyielding as a boulder, and yet as ordinary as a handful of sand. The sight was impossible. Here was Harry's body, laid bare and strikingly present, yet overshadowed by the power he seemed to channel. In that moment, Dumbledore felt as if he'd been struck by the most potent love potion, dazed, enthralled, and utterly captivated. Dumbledore felt a surge of joy as he extended a slender hand. Invisible magic gathered at his fingertips into a razor-thin blade, but a foot from Harry, it vanished without a trace, as though a single drop of water splashed into a roaring fire and turned instantly to steam. The dissipative force at work was subtle and elusive, eerily similar to what Harry himself was emitting. With his unparalleled grasp of magical theory, Dumbledore understood in an instant what had happened. Harry was like a seed planted in rich soil, quietly drawing in ambient power to awaken. Any direct surge of energy might simply be absorbed before it could take root. What Harry needed now was a gradual, ample supply of raw magic. "Flames!" Dumbledore cried, lifting his wand high. His lean arms slipped from beneath his robes as the wand's tip ignited. A column of fire burst forth, curling around Harry like a vast, glowing lariat. The boy swayed in the crimson light, but instead of being harmed, he looked transformed, an ember of life burning brighter, a phoenix ready to rise from the blaze. All the heat of the flames vanished into his slender form, leaving the grass on the pitch untouched by even a single spark. What now fell from the sky was no longer the raging inferno that threatened to scorch earth and clouds. It was a gentle, steady drizzle. Inside the castle, windows that had long lain dark flared back to life, and excited voices once again filled the corridors. On the flagship's deck, too, people who'd moments before fled for safety drifted back, curiosity pulling them into small clusters. By the edge of the Black Lake, the ancient redwood stirred. From its towering trunk, a wooden spiral staircase unfolded ribbon-like until its base touched the ground. One by one, bright green figures sprang onto the lawn, all turning their gaze to the stadium's center. There, a swirling pillar of fire coalesced above a diminutive figure, writhing like divine wrath before sweeping downward into the arena's heart. Astonishingly, though the flames roared with fierce intensity, there was not a single crackle, as if the fire itself refused to consume. A hush fell, and then a ripple of recognition passed through the crowd. The tall, thin silhouette belonged unmistakably to Albus Dumbledore. In that instant, everyone understood. This spectacle was no random display, but a pivotal moment tied to the game itself. Chapter 235, Unleashed. "This has to be the Foundry," one voice called out. "It must," another agreed. "The first two trials took place in the stadium. The third one has to be here." They watched eagerly as Dumbledore raised his wand, eyes blazing almost as fiercely as the spell he was about to cast. "There's fire both on the ground and in the air," a third observer noted. "This time, we'll tap into the magma itself, use a powerful incendiary, draw out the Earth's fire." Dumbledore felt their scrutiny, felt their expectations burning into him, but he did not waver. He unleashed the most potent fire charm he knew, pouring every ounce of his will into it. The cavern trembled. Lava veins glowed deep beneath the surface. Then, with a roar of raw magic, the spell broke through the rock. When the flames subsided, Harry's slender torso emerged from the glowing fissure, naked to the waist. The faint light of the molten stone painted his skin in flickering golds and reds. Dumbledore's cheeks warmed at the sight. Harry's boyish frame seemed so delicate, so exposed. He knew such a spectacle did little for anyone's discretion, but there was no turning back now. Harry was like a sapling that Dumbledore had nurtured in secret, coaxing out his extraordinary potential from the day he first arrived. He could not afford to falter when Harry stood on the brink of a great awakening. Beyond the embarrassment, beyond the Watcher's stares, Dumbledore remembered the darker moment he'd failed to shield Harry from Gellert's malicious intentions, and the guilt that had haunted him ever since. Madame Pomfrey had since examined Harry and quietly assured Dumbledore that he was unharmed. Still, the weight of those past mistakes pressed on his conscience. Now, in this molten cradle, Harry had at last the chance to grow at a speed no ordinary student could match. Dumbledore would see it through. He would not let his guilt, or anyone else, stop this transformation. He squared his shoulders, meeting the Watcher's fiery gazes with his own resolute calm. Tonight, Harry's destiny would be forged in flame, and Dumbledore would guard it with everything he had. P.S. Many thanks to classmates Lang and Wong for the monthly pass, and thank you to everyone else for your recommendations and subscriptions. Chapter 241, Infused Heat. Professor McGonagall's sharp gasp cut through the smoke. "Oh, Dumbledore, what are you doing?" Dumbledore paused, his eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles as he surveyed the ruined hall. He knew well that an animagus's chosen animal often mirrored their true nature, and that the nature of the animal could, in turn, influence the wizard. Even those who had mastered the art for decades were not immune. Minerva herself, one of only 7 registered animagi this century, had adopted a feline form to patrol her territory, Hogwarts. Whenever trouble flared within its walls, no matter how late the hour, she was the first to arrive. This night was no different. The final wisps of flame had died away, leaving the air heavy with the scent of scorched stone. In the center of the destroyed chamber, Harry Potter sat cross-legged and shirtless, his robes discarded in a tangled heap. It was hard to believe that only moments ago this room had been engulfed in wild, surging fire. He sat apart from the smoldering debris, breathing hard, his hair damp with sweat. His once neat robe lay crumpled beside him, testament to the powerful movements he'd made while casting. Professor McGonagall raised her wand, and a steady beam of emerald light burst from its tip, illuminating every ember-blackened wall and every drop of Harry's labored breath. The silence that followed was almost as fierce as the flames themselves. Thanks to her presence, no Hogwarts student dared stray beyond the castle walls. Only the visitors, from Beauxbatons, Durmstrang, and the distant Casterbury Academy, ventured forth, forming 3 concentric rings around the clearing. "What are you up to, Albus?" Professor McGonagall's voice cut the tense silence. Dumbledore made no reply. Harry blinked, shaking off the tree's lingering magic. He found himself at the center of the rings, with Dumbledore beside him and McGonagall watching anxiously. Around them, the foreign students waited, wide-eyed and silent. McGonagall's face had gone pale, her eyes flicked over Harry, suspicion etched in every line. Realizing he'd drawn her concern, Harry hurried to pull on his robes and stood, brushing off twigs. "Obviously we're holding a lesson," he said cheerfully. "Minerva, you know it's Saturday." "A lesson? In aeromancy?" McGonagall's voice trembled with disbelief. Harry nodded. "Yes, wind magic. We're practicing." McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line. She folded her arms. "Albus, aeromancy is an ancient and formidable discipline. You know how tremendously it drains one's magical reserves. Few adult wizards can even approach its demands." "Minerva, why don't we switch places?" Albus Dumbledore suggested as he strode toward the ruined courtyard. "Hold on, Albus," Professor McGonagall replied, her eyes still fixed on the smoldering turf. "We're not finished here." Harry Potter lay on the ground, unconscious. All around him, the stone walls and surrounding grass had been reduced to ash, but in a perfect 3-foot circle around his body, nothing was burned. Not his robes, not the turf beneath him. McGonagall's gaze sharpened. "The only thing capable of repelling a fire spell of that magnitude," she murmured, "is the Shield of Aeolus, ancient wind magic." Harry groaned and blinked awake. As he lifted his head, McGonagall knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Potter," she said sternly, "next time you decide to experiment with spells you barely understand, remember your age. A wizard's natural power truly doubles only after 17. It is far too dangerous for underage witches and wizards to tamper with such ancient incantations. Yes, you succeeded and narrowly avoided catastrophe, but it still took you 5 or 6 minutes to come to your senses. You opened your eyes and saw me standing here. You mustn't forget that you're still a minor." Harry sat up, rubbing his temples. Dumbledore settled onto a nearby bench with a faint, approving smile. McGonagall rose and offered Harry her hand. "Let's head back to the castle." By the look of you, I'd say you've borne the spell's backlash remarkably well. Harry took her hand. His robes were indeed pristine. He showed no sign of ill effect. McGonagall exchanged a long look with Dumbledore. If Harry truly could withstand ancient magic without consequence, that fact might prove invaluable. After all, it was already the end of February, more than 5 months since you-know-who's return, and every advantage counted. Harry trudged through the shadowed corridors of Hogwarts, his mind whirling with questions. Only moments ago, he'd drawn upon an ancient defensive magic of uncanny power, but why had Professor McGonagall forgiven him so readily? Why had Dumbledore offered nothing but that inscrutable smile? And above all, what exactly had happened in the arena? He could still feel the weightlessness of it all. One instant, he'd been standing firm. The next, it was as if the very earth had opened beneath him. Darkness pressed in, and he drifted in a void so complete it reminded him of floating in his mother's womb, protected but utterly cut off from the world. Then, as abruptly as it began, he'd snapped back to awareness, surrounded by a ring of astonished faces. By the time they reached the entrance hall, snippets of conversation drifted to his ears. Students were chattering about a colossal fire spell that had swept across the stadium. Even McGonagall admitted that it must have come from Dumbledore himself. Hearing that the headmaster had unleashed such a blaze left Harry more bewildered than ever. When Professor McGonagall finally dismissed the gathering, Harry slipped away with Mei Ling into a deserted corridor. He halted before Dumbledore, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Professor," he demanded, "what just happened? I thought we were practicing the wind transformation defense, flowing like air to evade an opponent. Why do I feel different? And why did you cast that massive fire spell for everyone to see?" Dumbledore's eyes sparkled behind his spectacles as he offered Harry a patient smile. "My dear boy, something extraordinary and rather unpredictable occurred in the arena. The ancient defense charm we were exploring taps into the 4 primal elements, earth, water, wind, and fire, all in harmony. Under normal circumstances, you'd channel wind to conceal your movement and earth to ground your stance. Fire and water would only emerge if your shield was breached to repel the attacker." Harry frowned. "But today my magic shifted on its own." The headmaster nodded gravely. "Indeed, you connected directly with the Earth's core, unleashing energy stronger than you realized. It became unstable, threatening to spiral beyond your control. So you stepped in with your own fire magic?" Harry guessed. Dumbledore's lips curved in a small, rueful smile. "Precisely. The widespread fire spell was not an offensive maneuver, but a safety mechanism, a conduit to draw off and stabilize the excess magic I borrowed from my own reserves to protect everyone present." Harry exchanged a look with Mei Ling, then returned his gaze to Dumbledore. "And all the students saw it? Every roaring flame?" "Yes," Dumbledore said, folding his hands behind his back. "I chose transparency over secrecy. Better they witness both the marvel and the danger of such power than be left to fearful speculation." Harry let out a slow breath, relief and apprehension warring inside him. His understanding of magic had just deepened, and its risks had never seemed more real. As the torches flickered along the corridor walls, Harry realized this was only the beginning of a far more complex journey into the mysteries of ancient magic. Chapter 16, The Hidden Reservoir. The air in the Chamber of Secrets was eerily still, filled with the musty scent of ancient stone. Harry lay unconscious on the cold floor as Dumbledore knelt beside him, releasing his finely tuned senses in favor of something far older and deeper, Harry's contract tree. In this castle, aside from Tom Riddle himself, nothing was closer to the boy. Dumbledore frowned, astonished at his when lapse in memory. In that moment of clarity, Harry's spirit felt like a seed planted in rich, dark earth, dormant yet pulsing with potential. His body had become a vast hollow, drawing in every scrap of magic that hovered in the cavern. It was a miracle no one could duplicate. If Harry awoke now, his reserves would still be empty, and the power he'd lost might take years to replace. There was only one answer. With a soft syllable of invocation, Dumbledore unleashed a brilliant fire spell. The surge of magic poured into Harry without resistance, filling him until his breaths deepened and his fingers twitched. When Harry finally opened his eyes, he stared at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "So you really did cast a fire spell to refill me," he whispered. But where did all that energy go before it reached me? It became yours, Dumbledore said quietly, tucking a stray lock of black hair behind Harry's ear. Your contract tree drew it in. You possess an affinity like no other. Outside the cavern, sunlight filtered through cracks in the mountain above. It was Sunday morning in Hogsmeade, and Ron perched on a rock, reading aloud from Wizard Weekly. Dumbledore channeled every last ounce of his power into Harry Potter's frail body. Harry lifted his head, a half-smile tugging at his lips. So the article wasn't lying after all. And for the first time in days, hope felt as real as the magic that now coursed through him. Ron said nothing, too distracted perhaps by the fact that his birthday was in just 2 days, March 1st. Draco, however, leaned in, scanning the ragged column of text. This is pure Rita Skeeter, he declared. I can spot her style a mile off. She's using a pseudonym to slip past my godfather. Sirius would never let her publish this drivel in the Daily Prophet under her real name. Big deal if it's her, Ron grumbled. Harry's reputation's already in the gutter. Now they're claiming he snuck onto the empty Quidditch pitch late at night with Dumbledore. Sure, Dumbledore's dramatic blue fire spell blew away the most scandalous rumors. After all, who lights up a stadium with fireworks during a secret midnight tryst? But everyone's convinced it's linked to the Triwizard Tournament. They've labeled it another special lesson from Dumbledore. I've even seen Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students giving Harry nasty looks. Ron cocked his head. I don't get it. Dumbledore's the headmaster of Hogwarts. Why shouldn't he teach his own student a bit of extra magic? Draco shook his head. It's not private tutoring that's raising eyebrows. It's the spectacle. Wizards of Dumbledore's caliber don't typically make a show of sneaking out after hours to set off enchanted flames on a deserted pitch. It just looks odd. As soon as he walked away, the others cried foul. His departure was undeniably unfair. After all, the rules stipulated that each warrior must solve the challenge unaided, and in their eyes, Harry was cheating, plain and simple. Chapter 715, The Shield of Aeolus and the Prejudiced Harry History, felt like it was repeating itself. Before Harry could even open his mouth, his friends had already started speculating. Harry, you've been cursed for no reason. What happened to all the magic Dumbledore put inside you? Ginny pressed her hand to his chest, as if she could feel the lost power beneath his robes. Then her eyes lit up. Wait, I almost forgot. You may not have a Norwegian ridgeback tattoo on your chest, but in your heart you carry a phoenix's flame. Fire and rebirth. How could I overlook that? Harry offered a wry smile. I can still sense it, Ginny. Nothing's changed. On Harry's other side, Draco slammed his fist on the table. I've got it. Dumbledore said that your current predicament is linked to you being a tree shepherd, and you once awakened an incredibly refined magical control ability. Could that gift be evolving again? Harry shook his head. Draco, it's called high precision control. That's the skill I came up with. And no, I haven't forgotten it. Harry shook his head. My ability still hasn't changed. He thought back over the past weeks. After descending into the lower chambers, he'd secretly tested his occlumency again and again, forcing himself to learn it through a lie, despite how contrary it felt to his nature, and yet it remained at nothing more than the entry level. Even after Dumbledore's infusion of magic that very night, there was no improvement. His mind-shielding power was exactly as weak as it had been before. Clearly, the infusion hadn't touched that skill. What about the contract tree? Ron asked. Harry shrugged. No change there either. I checked with Hagrid on Friday. Still static. A sigh escaped him. In spite of the disappointing progress, Harry felt a thrill at how far he'd come. Dumbledore had personally transformed him, filling him with raw magical energy, an honor that still made him tingle. It had been nearly a month since that moment, and with every new ounce of power he gained, he grew more certain that he could bring his mother back. Ryan had promised that once the summer tasks were complete, her resurrection was all but guaranteed. But Harry knew extra strength could only help his cause. What exactly has changed? Ginny pressed her forehead against Harry's chest, her voice soft but urgent. If there's no real benefit, then why has Dumbledore singled you out all this time? Harry sighed, resting a hand on her shoulder. There has to be a reason. Professor Dumbledore told me it's vital for my future. But if it were something easy to grasp, don't you think I'd have discovered it by now? A new week began. By Monday at lunchtime, Harry noticed an unexpected calm around him in the Great Hall. Instead of outright resentment or envy, his classmates looked on with mild curiosity. Hogwarts students weren't as outspoken or as judgmental as those at other schools. They didn't pester him for excuses, only whispered questions about what secret lessons he was receiving from the headmaster himself. Word soon spread that a handful of well-informed pupils had consulted the portraits in Dumbledore's office and uncovered the truth. Harry was being tutored in an extraordinarily rare and challenging ancient spell known as the Shield of Aeolus. The magic posed 3 daunting difficulties. 1. The incantation was exceptionally long and intricate, demanding precise pronunciation and timing. 2. Once cast, the shield required a constant flow of magical energy to maintain, no small feat for even the most skilled wizard. 3. Its anchor point was Aeolus from Greek mythology. But which Aeolus? 3 distinct figures shared that name, and summoning the correct one was a puzzle in itself. As plates of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding circulated, small clusters of students gathered near Harry's table, straining to hear any detail. "Does it really stop a basilisk's gaze?" one Hufflepuff muttered. "I heard it can block curses too," a Ravenclaw chimed in, her eyes shining. Ginny slipped into the seat beside Harry, her expression equal parts proud and anxious. "Take it slow," she whispered. "You don't want to burn yourself out." He gave her a reassuring squeeze. "I know, but if Dumbledore believes I'm ready, then I'll give it everything I've got." Surrounded by hushed speculation and the flicker of enchanted candles, Harry felt the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders, yet beneath it lay a surge of determination. Mastering the Shield of Aeolus would be no easy task, but if it truly was essential for what lay ahead, he was ready to face the challenge. Chapter 12. The True Aeolus. Most wizards, and even many classical scholars, don't realize that Greek myth names 3 distinct figures called Aeolus, yet only one of them is the true wind god, the mighty son of Hippotes, whom Homer describes in the Odyssey. The second Aeolus, a son of Poseidon, has almost no connection to breezes or gales. The third, his grandson, appears in later myths simply as a divine custodian, tasked with keeping records of the winds, not as a god of the winds himself. Only after Homer did some writers begin conflating the grandson's role with that of the original Aeolus, bestowing upon him the honors he never earned in earlier lore. Why does this matter in magic? When you cast the Aeolus shield, you must anchor your spell to the genuine wind god. No matter how much magical power you accumulate, how perfectly you pronounce the incantation, or how meticulously you complete the ritual, invoking the wrong Aeolus yields only a feeble barrier, or none at all. True success depends on summoning the primal force of wind itself, as embodied by the original deity. Last Saturday, Harry Potter demonstrated exactly how it should be done. Facing what seemed like an unstoppable inferno, Dumbledore's legendary fire spell, potent enough to turn the entire stadium to ash, Harry didn't flinch. With unwavering focus, he summoned the Aeolus shield, linking it unmistakably to the true wind god. Under his protection, the flames roared and clawed at the barrier, but never breached it. Students watching from the castle towers through telescopes witnessed the grass on the pitch and every fold of Harry's robes emerge completely unscathed. In their eyes, that flawless display of defensive magic was nothing short of remarkable. Harry couldn't shake the feeling that his classmates' newfound enthusiasm at Hogwarts had something to do with Ravenclaw's involvement. After all, word of his mastery over that rare, ancient magic had spread across the castle that very night, and everyone knew how difficult it was to pull off. It wasn't that the other houses lacked talent. Some Gryffindors, Slytherins, and Hufflepuffs had excellent grades. But this particular branch of archaic spellcraft was so obscure that only the most devoted Ravenclaws, those brilliantly eccentric minds who pursued magic purely for the love of knowledge, bothered to study it in depth. And now that Harry himself sat in Ravenclaw Tower, those students had gone into overdrive. They organized late-night meetings, pooled obscure manuscripts, and pored over every scrap of information they could find, all to help Harry hone his gift. They even drew up strategies and offered him advice. It wasn't the first time they'd rallied behind him. During earlier competitions, they'd made equally heroic efforts to secure his success. Yet Harry scarcely noticed their campaigns anymore. Between piling schoolwork and his duties caring for the children under his supervision, he simply didn't have the time or energy to concentrate on ambitious magical projects. For now, he'd set aside thoughts of channeling large-scale arcane power, at least until his schedule eased and he could devote himself fully once more. Tomorrow is Ron's birthday, and he's been counting down the days. Ever since Harry presented him with the Nimbus 2000, albeit one Ron had traded to Anthony, he joked that it covered every birthday and Christmas for the next 3 years. Harry might have muddled the details, but Ron reminded him about that promise again on Harry's own 12th birthday. Why? Then, just this Halloween, Harry surprised his best friend with a shining firebolt. After 2 top-of-the-line racing brooms in 18 months, what could possibly top that? Harry paced the Burrow's kitchen, brow furrowed. He needed a gift that would really impress Ron, and fast. Ginny, perched on a stool beside him, offered one of her gentle smiles. "You know, I spent over a month curating those vouchers for you. Just pick one. Ron will love whatever you choose." Neville leaned against the pantry door and snorted. "Ginny's your girlfriend, not Ron," he teased, though there was no malice in his tone. Harry's ears burned. True enough, Ginny's birthday was August 11th, and last year he dashed into Diagon Alley at the last minute to grab her a plain ceremonial robe. He'd hardly given it the thought he was giving Ron's present now. He sighed, half amused, half chagrined. "You've got a point," he admitted, "but I can't let him down." He glanced at Ginny's encouraging nod and at Neville's expectant grin. There was still time before tomorrow, just enough to find the perfect way to show Ron how much he mattered, and Harry was determined not to waste another minute. He'd even heard what Neville and Ginny were implying, and, from their point of view, he really was as dull and insipid as a bowl of water. His slip-ups at Ginny's birthday in August weren't due to laziness or lack of care. He'd spent the entire day wrestling with the lingering fragments of Voldemort's soul inside him. No wonder he'd been in a daze all afternoon, drifting off into daydreams about Bella. Chapter 243, Harry Trelawney Potter. With March finally here, Hogwarts enjoyed longer hours of daylight, but the thaw hadn't tamed the bitter wind that sliced across the castle grounds. Every time Harry and his friends stepped outside, the gusts left their cheeks raw and their fingers numb. Worse still, the owls struggled to complete their deliveries. A sudden updraft would veer them off course, and letters lay undelivered far longer than usual. No one was more exasperated than Ron Weasley. Since last summer, he'd exchanged letters with his pen pal, Miss Wayne Campbell, a friendship born of a chance holiday encounter. Each morning at breakfast, Ron scanned the owl post trays, hoping to spot her familiar emerald green envelopes. Then, during the short break before their next class, he'd hurry to the owlery, hand his reply to Zhu Weichong's trusted birds, and watch anxiously as they launched into the stormy sky. Most professors might forgive a few late posts, but Professor Snape was not among them. The moment Ron arrived tardy with his owl post, Snape's barb, about chronically slack timekeeping, would ring through the dungeon corridors sharper than any cutting remark. This morning, Ron finally set down the quill after rewriting his letter for the 3rd time. Clutching the freshly sealed parchment against his chest, he pulled his scarf tighter around his neck and braced himself for the courtyard. If any creatures could navigate those turbulent winds, it was Hogwarts's owls, familiar with every hidden nook and cranny of the castle. With a determined nod, Ron strode forward, ready to send his reply on its way. The owlery was always alive with activity. Whether it was Julie Joan or Harry's beloved Hedwig, the birds preferred to roost there. Built as a special sanctuary for owls, it doubled as a nesting ground and a hub for message delivery. Any young witch or wizard without a personal owl could leave their letters in the owlery and trust that another bird would carry them where they needed to go. Ron reckoned that this very convenience explained why cats outnumbered owls among Hogwarts pets. If you didn't own an owl of your own, you could simply drop by the owlery for your mail. Today's gusty winds had already forced Ron into yet another trip out to the owl shed after Charms class. As they climbed the winding stairs, Harry leaned closer. Do you think Filch knows you and Miss Campbell have been exchanging letters? He asked, eyebrows raised. Ron shrugged, and Harry couldn't help but roll his eyes. Every time they ventured beyond the castle's walls, they risked bumping into students from other schools, students who whispered behind their backs or shot them cold looks. Harry found it maddening and had grown increasingly reluctant to leave the castle at all, but he could never say no to Ron's insistence. Harry's mind wandered back to the start of the month, when he'd nearly broken things off with Ginny over that gift fiasco. Ginny had been hurt, convinced his present showed unfair favoritism toward Ron. In the end, Harry knew it was better to mend fences than to let pride or gossip drive them apart. Ginny still refused to come out to the shed. At first, Harry couldn't understand why, but now it all made sense. Ron, Lavender Brown's boyfriend, had been secretly writing letters to another woman. Miss Campbell, by all appearances, wasn't exactly a prize, yet Ron clearly admired her outlook on life and felt a real connection with her. If Harry were in Lavender's shoes, he might have reacted even more dramatically than Ginny had. Suddenly he saw it. To Ginny, Ron himself had become the Miss Campbell in their relationship. Fortunately, Harry didn't need to distance himself from Ron to keep an eye on him. As Ron's roommate and soon-to-be brother-in-law and, in a sense, Ginny's brother, he had every opportunity to monitor those clandestine letters. All he needed was a bowl of water to reveal any invisible ink or hidden messages, especially when it came to suspicious gifts. Harry, are you all right? Didn't you just want to ask me some ething? Ron's voice cut through Harry's reverie. He found himself clutching the window frame, staring blankly at the garden beyond. Lately, Harry had been slipping into these dazed moments more often. Sometimes he wondered if his brain simply couldn't handle all the magical energy swirling inside it. I was daydreaming, he stammered, as the realization snapped his mind back into focus. His thoughts whirled, racing to catch up with each other. Harry watched the spider inch its way up the web, strung in the window's upper right corner. When he'd turned to question Ron, the little creature was still clinging to the ledge. Its pace told him nearly a minute had slipped by. "Let's go to Madame Pomfrey," Ron urged. Harry shook his head. "No, this has everything to do with the magic Dumbledore poured into me. We need to find Ryan first." Ron frowned. "But where is Ryan?" "We need Ginny," Harry said. "She and Luna have been in constant contact." They hurried into the library and rounded a distant stack to find Ginny and Luna stretched out on the floor, surrounded by piles of open books. Ordinarily, Madame Pince would have swept through this tower every quarter hour, snapping at students who disturbed her precious volumes. But she hadn't appeared. Only now, as Ron practically dragged Harry through the shelves, and Harry yanked Ginny to her feet while shouting for Ryan, did Mrs. Pince emerge from behind her desk, frozen in shocked silence. Mrs. Pince's domain never extended beyond her precious 3/4 acre of bookshelves. "Here," said a soft voice in the minds of the three anxious friends, and the enchanted map flickered into life, its tiny red dot marking Ryan's location. "He's in the restricted section," Ron hissed. "Wait, are we even still in the library?" Harry jerked awake from his daydream, pressing back against a nearby shelf, as if expecting Mrs. Pince's hawk-like nose to materialize at his shoulder. Any student who'd spent time in her library knew that sensation all too well. You could obey every rule to the letter, and if you left the slightest crease in a page, she'd spot it, and shoot you a glare that could freeze ink. Ron went rigid beside him, but there was no time to worry about wrathful librarians. Ginny had already grabbed their arms and was hauling them toward the far corner of the library, where a heavy rope marked the boundary of the restricted section. Without hesitating, she vaulted over it as if it were nothing more than a garden fence. Harry's heart hammered as he followed her lead. They were about to come face to face with the very threat that had stalked them before, an ominous presence waiting in the shadows of the restricted section. Harry's mind went blank even as his feet carried him forward. He caught sight of the banned books on the high shelves, once gleaming gold titles now cracked and peeling, some volumes untitled, others marred by dark, dried bloodstains that seemed to whisper in the dim light. A cold shiver ran down his spine. With a sudden jolt, he blinked awake. Kneeling in front of him were Ryan and Luna, crimson and silver spines scattered at their knees, arcane runes dancing across spilled pages. Off to one side, Ginny and Ron exchanged anxious looks. Apparently, they'd already filled the pair in on what had happened. Ryan met Harry's eyes gravely. "According to divination, your third eye has just awakened." Ginny frowned. "But Harry's always had visions. Long before now, right?" Ryan shook his head. Those were echoes of Voldemort's thoughts, more like synesthesia than real prophecy. Ron pressed his lips into a thin line. "So if this keeps up, Harry's going to end up like Professor Trelawney, all cryptic and unpredictable?" Luna flashed Ron a serene smile. He scowled back, arms folded, clearly offended at being compared to the famously eccentric divination teacher. Ginny reached out and squeezed Harry's hand, her green eyes full of concern. Harry took a slow breath, trying to calm the rush of excitement and fear thudding in his chest. Harry stared at Lavender, denly regretting his earlier outburst about Snape. "Then why do I feel so out of it?" he asked. "Wouldn't someone with a third eye be like Professor Trelawney, constantly predicting the future?" He swallowed hard. "That's not its purpose. Your third eye isn't for prophecy. It's pure combat instinct. It doesn't protect you from me. The moment it registers my presence, your brain panics, shuts down, and forces you to flee.